Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Prymal podcast. If you're like me, you're probably sick of all the guesswork when it comes to your training, your health, trying to achieve your goals in life, and you're probably frustrated by all the old wives' tales and rhetoric that surrounds health and fitness these days. When my mate said that his dad told him that they ran 17 miles up a mountain holding eggs between their ass cheeks 5 days a week to train for the ping pong tournaments. So we should probably try that. If you're tired of trying all the fads and not really knowing what you're doing or why you're doing it, particularly if what you're doing is trying to get fitter and healthier, either to be a better athlete or just to be fitter and healthier, then this episode is going to tickle your fancy. My guest today is Seán Kinane from Health Matters. Seán holds qualifications in advanced nutrition and health coaching, nutritional therapy. He's an advanced sports and exercise nutrition advisor, and he's one of the most, if not the most, experienced practitioners in Ireland when it comes to VO2 Max and Metabolic testing. These are tests which are used to essentially find out how efficient your body is at using oxygen and how this affects your performance, your health, your ability to train, and so on. At first, I did think that this might be a bit too niche and technical to have a whole podcast on. But after speaking to Seán for 5 minutes and seeing just how much knowledge he has on health as a whole, I knew how important this chat would be. Not just for the ultra nerdy sports scientists or elite athletes out there, but for anyone who wants to understand the foundations of getting fitter and healthier. And to be honest, that should be all of us. I genuinely buzzed off this conversation with Seán. There's so much value in podcasts like this, and he's giving it to us for free. So it's well worth grabbing a pen and jotting down a few notes during this episode, because you'll pick up a few bits that can definitely help change how you're living and how you're training. Enjoy. Welcome to our shared journey to find the answers to questions about health, wellness, nutrition, performance, life and success, and to craft the most resilient, hardy and happy humans you've ever seen. Welcome to the Prymal podcast. Seán Kinane, how are you getting on?
Good man, how are you?
Not too bad. Thanks very much for joining me on the Prymal podcast.
No bother, my pleasure.
We've essentially done a podcast before turning the mics on now. We've been here chatting away. So to be honest with you, I'm very excited about this, because I anybody knows my background, I've studied in this realm. VO2 Max, athletic performance, physiology, sports biology, all this sort of stuff. But it's been a long time since I've been in that world. So I'm very, very excited to refresh my knowledge, and I know you're the man to do it. Like I do in every one of these podcasts, would you mind giving us a little introduction to yourself, a little bit about your past, your history, and how you got to where you are today? And we'll explain all of that, where you are today, when we get to it. But would you mind giving us a bit of background?
No bother. So as you said, I'm Seán Kinane. I run and operate a company called Health Matters. It's been in operational 10 years. I've done over 10,000 VO2 tests. I'm one of the most active testers in Europe. I'm an advanced exercise nutrition advisor. I am a sports performance specialist, and I've recently graduated as a nutritional therapist. So
it's a long list.
There's lots going on. It's something I'm massively passionate about, and I love doing what I do. So as you said, we've covered a lot already before we even got into it, and I even held back on it. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting. So I set the company up 10 years ago. Having worked as a personal trainer in Australia, came across the equipment, really started to look into it a bit more, really found it beneficial, seen the niche in the market and went for it. Don't get me wrong, at the start, 10 years ago, I was up playing FIFA till 3 a.m. I have 2 clients a week, 3 clients a week, and it was just through hard grit and determination, starting canvassing 6 a.m. one side of the city, canvassing 7 p.m. another side of the city, and just willing to work, willing to ring people. I've no issue with people saying no, and then just proving my worth and developing a brand and establishing being the best at what I do in the country.
Yeah. So there's so many parts to this that I really enjoy, and the reason I do these conversations is, one, you've built your own business. I think that's amazing. It's an incredible thing to do, especially something you're so passionate about. But the world you've built your business in surrounds something I'm really interested in. And I looked at the main logo, or the main kind of first sentence you see on your website is "take control of your own health," and that is just a phrase I bandy around all the time. And you've taken this to a really, really deep and comprehensive level. a lot of people who listen to this, you mentioned VO2 max there. That's going to be a huge central part of what we talk about today. And it's one branch of the many, many things that you do, which we'll touch on. We'll probably need to do another podcast to get to that as well.
No problem.
But to start us off and to ease into this world of, I mean, you're talking about you're doing X amount of tests every year and you're very, very active doing all this. Some people don't even know what a VO2 max is. So how about we start from the very, very basics. Now, I said I studied this years ago. Treat me like I know absolutely nothing, because I've probably forgotten most of what I do know. And let's start with VO2 max. What is VO2 max and why is it relevant?
Right, so VO2, what it stands for volume of oxygen, and it's measured in milliliters of oxygen per kilo weight of body mass, averaged over a minute.
Okay.
So it's a number.
It's a number.
Theoretically, all right. It's not the be all and end all. It is a number that can change with weight, with training. It's not what people, like if you come in and score a low VO2, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
If you come in and score a high VO2, it's not the end of the world in terms of you mightn't be able to light the world on fire. It's a predictor of performance, basically.
Okay.
We do work with various governing bodies that would require someone's fitness to be at a certain level. So they need to score a certain level of oxygen consumption. We work with like divers who need to score a certain amount of oxygen usage. So it's a number, it's a performance indicator. The higher the VO2, theoretically, the fitter and more healthy you are. And in this climate, actually, if you put it back to the COVID-19, those with high VO2s don't suffer massively from COVID.
Really? So they're able to manage the symptoms better?
Yeah, because it's a respiratory disease at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So when you look into the details of high VO2, which is going to come from exercise training, that people that do get it don't suffer bad symptoms or just don't get it.
Yeah.
So VO2 is a number that can change.
Okay.
It's a predictor of performance, but it's relevant to an individual. So you have to put that into context. We would do VO2 testing on sports clubs, on triathlon clubs, and everybody's like, oh, what did John get? What did Mary get? Well, John and Mary are a foot in the difference in height. They're different sex. They weigh 15 kilos different. So looking at their VO2 as a number isn't really going to give you much clarity. But everyone still wants that. And especially professional athletes. Like you get a professional athlete that comes in at start of camp, they might score. So you're graded basically to 100, from 0 to 100. The highest ever VO2 max recorded in the world is a 96. That was a cross-country skier. Like phenomenal. Like altitude training. It's going to develop a growth of capacity. The highest I've ever personally tested is an 89.8. So like I've seen some really good. So let's work backwards. If you're scoring in the 40s for a female into our sport, it's good. Male, that's just kind of general fitness, 40, early 50. So naturally male, this isn't being sexist, males are going to have a bigger capacity. They're going to have a bigger lung function. So the VO2 tends to be higher. So a professional female athlete would be probably scoring into the 50s. Endurance female athlete, low 60s. Male endurance athlete, high 60s. When I'm testing people in the 70s, I know we're dealing with some really good potential here.
Okay.
And then when we get people in the 80s, like you need to elite
level.
Yeah, this is a proper elite level. But it can change, and that's one thing. So you get a professional athlete in, start a camp, and I'm doing a lot of work with the MMA world at the moment, and they tend to be very, very driven athletes that will always want the best. So you get an athlete that comes in, and we're going to touch on all of this over the next while. Their length of test has gone up, their heart rate has reduced, so they've become more economical. Their percentage recovery has gone up. Their threshold has gone up, their speed of breakdown has gone up, everything's gone up, but their VO2 is down 0.2 of a milliliter, and they're devastated. Like
the number means everything to
them.
Yeah.
So it's not always about driving that number higher. Yes, the higher the number, the better. A prediction of VO2 that's given on like one of the wearables, like someone comes in and goes, oh, my watch tells me I score a 56, and they come in and I'm like, you only scored a 51. They're like, no, I didn't. But your watch isn't connected to your lungs, so it's a direct correlation with oxygen uptake. So how much oxygen you consume per kilo weight of your body, averaged over a minute.
So traditionally when people talk about fitness, now forget the modern world of fitness that includes like CrossFit and weightlifting and all that kind of stuff, your all-round fitness, aerobic fitness, when people say I'm this fit, this is the number we should be looking at. It's how effective your body is at using oxygen, essentially.
It's gold standard.
Yeah, it's gold standard.
There's no other test in the world that will give you what VO2 gives you.
Okay.
So people think VO2 is just a test that gives you a number, but when we go through everything that a VO2 test gives you that we carry out, you'll think it's not just a number. So I get questions that are saying, but why would I want to know my VO2?
Yeah.
Because when we know your VO2, we know your heart rate elevation, your recovery, your training zones, your thresholds, your breakdown speeds, because it's all related. It's all directly related. And another thing recently that we've done is, so a lot of organizations that would traditionally do bleep testing or chest or step testing in order to get in for a certain job.
I can hear people shivering at the word bleep test.
They can't do it anymore because of COVID, because they're saying that the doctor or whoever the client, the person operating the test, can't stand too close to them. So now they're saying, okay, so we're going to use a chest or step test as a prediction of VO2. But now what they're saying, now I've got contact where like, okay, we're actually going to run VO2. Or you have people that aren't getting jobs because they're failing a bleep test, because the bleep test is theoretically giving them a VO2 score. I'm like, well, why don't you just do a VO2? So you have someone coming in that needs to get a 38 VO2 max. They come in, they score 39, but they still go fail their VO2. Or sorry, they fail their bleep test. So I have someone at the moment that's using my data and taking someone to court to say that they're fit enough to do their job because they've done a VO2 test, but they failed their bleep.
Wow.
They're not good at turning. You know, so the bleep where they have to turn.
It could be a biomechanical issue.
It is, it seems to be a biomechanical issue. Now, this girl is carrying a bit of weight and we're working with that as well, but her VO2 is what it needs to be. Yeah. She's fit enough to do her job. So VO2 can be used for loads of different things.
Okay. This is why I want to state this at this point in the podcast, because we are going to go down deep into performance and athletic performance and stuff like that as well. But for normal life, like you've just mentioned, people now have requirements, aerobic requirements for their job. So for normal life, this is something that has real world applications for everybody, not just for I want to run a such and such time marathon, I want to be an elite rower or whatever. This is a health measure. This is a metric, a health metric. Realistically,
look, the higher the VO2, the better shape you're going to be in.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, if you can look at it in different ways. Lung function to weight. So if you're going to drop a couple of kilos to increase your VO2, it's going to benefit you.
Yeah.
So you've people, triathletes would be traditional for this, and a lot of people would be able to link it in. Like, how many cyclists do you see that you'll be like, look, pal, if you dropped a couple of stone, you'd be significantly better. You're going to be able to carry less weight up a hill.
Power to weight ratio, yeah.
But your VO2 is going to grow. So let's just use some simple numbers. You score a 50 VO2 max and you drop weight. So let's look at what the requirement of weight is. So every single pound of muscle or fat in your body requires oxygen. So if you reduce weight, there's more oxygen in your body to get to the working muscles. So you stay, and I'll cover it in depth, aerobic for longer. So you stay efficient for longer because you've reduced your weight.
Yeah.
Because there's more oxygen in the body.
Okay, yeah.
So it is looking from a sports performance, but from a health predictor, the higher the VO2, the fitter and healthier you're going to be, because what VO2 is relevant to.
And just out of interest, while we're on this point, what are some of the jobs that have requirements for fitness?
The guards, the army, deep sea divers, the prison service.
Okay.
You know, like fire brigade, we've worked with them all.
And is it starting to happen now that you have some corporate environments that are having requirements for their average employees, like no disrespect, desk workers?
I wouldn't say workers. Requirements, but corporate work for us is a massive thing where we will go on site. So one of the things that makes my company so successful is that we're portable. We can go anywhere. Like, I've worked in Skull and Cork to Letterkenny and Donegal. I'm based in Dublin, Mayo, Cavan, Leitrim. You know, I've worked in them all. I can go anywhere. So to be able to provide the level of physiological testing that we provide gives employees or employers a better insight into their employees. So they're like, okay, not that we share the data with the employer, but they're like, okay, we're going to get in, Sean's going to do testing on you, we're going to set you a task to see if you become healthier, fitter, and then we're going to retest you. So requirement, no, for your desk job, but definitely more interest in it.
Okay. Right, we've scraped the surface. We've pressed the button on VO2. Let's go a little bit deeper. So the basic description is it's your body's ability to use oxygen. How efficient your body, how good your body is at using oxygen.
Well, let's look at the test, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
So we do test in VO2 max on run testing, road testing, or bike testing.
Okay.
And it's a progression overload till failure. That's the easiest way to look at it. And people are like, what, really? Like, I've had people get sick. I've had people need to sit down post-testing. I've never had anyone get sick in the mask, thankfully. God, so maybe a description of the test. So what it is, you have a mask on your face with a valve on the front of it. You're wearing a heart rate monitor. First minute of your test, you're standing completely still. All your data will be inputted into the machinery: age, height, weight, experience, level of activity, what you do. And then, depending on what your sport is, we would either do it as a run, row, or bike test. Now, your traditional triathlete will ask, well, what's better? Well, whatever discipline you want to work on, because the data is going to be completely different. And we'll cover that when we cover thresholds. Field sport, do it as a run test. if you're just walking, if you're running, if you're not really in a particular sport, I'd say do it as a run test, because in order to do a bike test and a road test, you have to create power. So I would give you a new aim to hit. So unless you're conditioned to produce power in the legs or as a rower, you're not doing that test. We do it as a run test. So let's use a standard run test as an example. Get you hooked up, heart rate monitor on. First minute of the test, you're standing completely still. So while you're getting still is we're getting your heart rate measurement, we're getting your basic oxygen uptake level, and then we start you walking. So nice and easy, depending on what your 5K pace, 10K pace, marathon pace is, I'll start you at a certain speed. So you'll either start at 4, 5, 6 or 7 kilometers an hour. And every single minute it gets harder. And you're thinking 10 minutes in, you're thinking, well, this isn't that bad, you know. But you have to remember that further we get into the test, the higher the speeds are. But it's not just speed, there's incline as well.
Yeah.
So at the end of the test, you could be running 20, 22, 23 kilometers an hour on an 8% gradient. Your average length of test, but people always ask me, and I'm not going to give you the answer now, because people then just aim at average. What we want to prove, and the whole point of me operating as a business, is to prove individuality. So individuality will bring personal success. And individuality based off data from scientific testing is going to stimulate the body the best way. So it's a progressional overload till failure. What my failure is, what your failure is completely different.
Yeah.
So it's about you. It's not about anyone else. It's about identifying your physiological data and advising and planning to increase it. It is uncomfortable, but it's only uncomfortable for a few minutes. You know, like every single person that comes off the treadmill when we're in the office 6, 7, 8 minutes later says, I should have kept going. But that's all well and good when you're sitting in my office with no mask on 7, 8, 9 minutes after doing your test. But when you're at the end of that test, you have a mask on, it feels like you can't breathe. Why you can't breathe is because you're exhaling so much. The oxygen intake is there. The VO2 maxes are occurring at that point. So your VO2 max is the highest level of oxygen is at the end of your test. Because you're exhaling so much, there's massive byproduct production. Your head is the most important part in a VO2 test. Like I do my own VO2 tests. I've done 100 more of them.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah, because I try out different protocols, understand the mask, make sure I'm okay with it. Every employee I get, they have to run a test on me. So my most recent test that I done when one of the employees was putting me through it, it was my head in the last part.
Yeah.
Like I've only got into running since lockdown 1. My sport would be Muay Thai, so I wouldn't necessarily.
Oh, you didn't have a running background before this?
No.
Okay.
So like I would have always been, like, believe it or not, my family would have been massively involved in sport all their life, water polo, swimming. I was involved in basketball, but out of my brothers, I was never the most sporty type. They played football, I didn't. I played basketball. I gained a bit of weight, and I started in the gym probably about 15 or 16, just tipping along, and then obviously I became a lot more interested into it. But I never actually. I say do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. So apply what I know. And then I started to run a bit more. But when I did my last VO2 test, it was my head. I was like, you're done, Seán. And I'm like, no, you're not. Keep going. You know, like, so the last couple of minutes, you're fully anaerobic. You're in pain, but you know you can keep going. Yeah. So we will get people where they completely plateau. So the VO2 number just levels out. They're not going to physically be able to consume any more oxygen.
Well, that was what I was told. Full disclosure, I've done about 10 of these as well as a guinea pig when I was in college. And they told me we know when you're done because we can see the plateau. So what I was told now is until you hit that plateau, you're not done. So keep going. And you're dead right. It was the head come up to the end, and it is brutal because you're literally trying to find your max. And most people have never gone there before. You've never tried to find your max. But these guys were telling me we can see on the graph when you plateau. That's when we know you're probably done. Yeah. But until then, you probably have a little bit more to
And you can see where people start to go back negative. So let's just use an easy number, 60 VO2 max. So 2 minutes they're at 60 VO2. And I'm like, all right. Like most time, the test is stopped by the client. It's signaled to be stopped by the client. Or if there's a safety issue, I'm going to stop it. Or if threshold's been in, max heart rate's in, VO2 max is in, and I say, Dan, you're done. You know, we're going to pull the plug, and you're like, no, I'm going to keep going. Okay. And I'm like, okay, well, look, you're paying.
I definitely didn't say I'm going to keep going.
You're paying for it, but let's keep pushing if you want to go. You're gaining nothing. And then all of a sudden, 58, 57, the fraction exchange of gases drop off, the breathing pattern changes, you start to panic. And then I'm like, look, your VO2's down 15 minutes later, we're stopping, 15 milliliters, we're stopping the test. Yeah. You know, so, or a lot of people come off the treadmill and I'm like, you should have kept going. But there's only so much I can advise. I'm like, right, come on, keep going, you're safe. I've had one person fall off a treadmill I'll tell you the story in a minute. And
they have a big red panic button.
We do.
Okay, good.
And then, like my job, and one of the things that feedback I'm often given is how safe the client feels in my arms, in terms of me talking about position, talking about heart, talking about their oxygen, encouraging them to keep going, looking at the position on the treadmill. Like the latter part of the test, I'll change my position so I'm ready to catch them. Wow. Realistically, bike testing and road testing much easier because they just fail because they can't produce the power. But so that's how a VO2 bike test would stop, is because they physically can't produce the power. Yeah. So I'm asking to hit 450 watts. They can't do it. On the road test, 450 watts, they can't do it. So that's a stop on that test. Okay. But on the treadmill, you're going to keep going. Yeah. So one of my jobs, and one of the things I really try and get across to the staff, is that the client safety is number one. So let's say you keep going. I'm like, right, keep going. You're like, no, I want out. I'm like, keep going. I have to take what you say. If you want out, I can't be screaming at you to keep you going. Yeah. And then you go, look, there is a bit more in the tank. VO2 is averaged over a minute, so I'll be able to pinpoint a couple of points. I'm like, okay, you actually scored a 53 here, but you didn't hold it, so it's average for a minute. We have potential to grow here. Take on advice, what I say, based on your training. We're going to be able to grow your VO2. So you can see there's potential for growth. Yeah. You know, or you have a client that comes in, they're carrying a bit of weight, drop a bit of weight. People that come in for a job and they're like, I have to score 40. All right, drop 2 kilos and you'll score 40. You know, so if you look at it in that sense as well, it's relevant to body weight. Okay. You become more efficient, you drop weight.
Yeah. And I like that there's multiple ways of looking at this problem of I want to increase my... And someone probably... the competitive people probably say I want a higher number, my VO2 max, but they're probably coming to find out how they can improve towards their goal, which is... usually a sports-based goal. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So there's multiple ways of doing that. Like you said, you could reduce weight, you could change biomechanics, or you could do multiple things, and you can implement specific training programs that you would give.
Yeah. So when people come in, people come to me because they want to get better. Yeah. What's going to make you better as an athlete is to become more efficient. Yeah. And that's where thresholds come in, and that's where aerobic and anaerobic capacity come in. So we'll go straight into it.
Yeah, let's go for it, yeah.
So people will often say VO2 is just a number. How's it going to make me better? So within a VO2 test, we're measuring everything. Gas exchange, oxygen usage, looking at when you're aerobic, when you're anaerobic, where you need to do your long runs, where you need to do your short runs. So probably let's bring it back and let's look at heart rate. So this whole theory, 220 minus your age is your max heart rate, is bullshit.
Okay. What's the name?
The Maffetone method would be 180 minus your age. So it's just a different method. A lot of people, so you'll have people, use me and my brother as an example. I never get my heart rate over 160. My brother gets his heart rate over 210. He's older than me. He's a competitive swimmer. We, as two people, are exposed to the same DNA and genetics. Yeah. We, of anybody, should have the same heart rate maxes. So if he took 220 minus his age and wanted to perform, he would be walking. Yeah. If I took 220 minus my age, I physically couldn't do it. Yeah. So 220 minus your age or 180. Now the theory on Maffetone is a bit different, and I like what he's trying to do. So he's trying to slow people down, because everybody just wants to go fast. So the science behind it is that everybody wants to be running faster. So what they are is they're anaerobic. Now I just want to cover something because it's all related to heart rate. Yeah. What we look at during a test is heart rate elevation. So what is your max heart rate? How it elevates? Is there jumps? Is there drops? And as I was saying off air, I'm delighted to say that I've an affiliation now to get cardiac screening done, Amazing. Stress test done, exercise stress test done. Because over the years of testing, done over 10,000 tests, thankfully, I've only stopped less than 10. You know, where I'm worried about heart rate. And within them, 2 or 3 people did require heart operations within a very short period of time of me stopping their test. So we look at heart rate elevation. It's not considered a sports ECG. However, we're looking at live heart rate consistently. And if there's any variabilities, any jumps or drops, we'll change the monitors, change the pickups, add in some electrode gels. And if it's not working, your test is getting stopped. And now I can make a direct referral. So get your heart rate checked.
That's brilliant.
And saving lives. Like 2 people have rang me and told me I've saved their life. Which is like if something wants to keep me going and work.
There it is right there. Absolutely, yeah.
So what we look at heart rate elevation. We look at max heart rate. Max heart rate to me means nothing. Nothing, because nothing's worked out off max heart rate. It's how your heart rate gets there. Okay. Then when we stop the test, we do a 2-minute active recovery. So we look at heart rate reduction, which is really important. Field sport athlete, MMA athlete, boxer, triathlete, cyclist, they're going to look at recovery from a different perspective. Yeah. Let's look at field sport. A lot of start-stopping. Yeah. You need that recovery to be better. Let's look at MMA athletes, boxers. They've 1 minute in the ring, in the corner. working with athletes, I say to them, and a lot of the feedback is, so let's say you go on championship rounds, you're fighting someone, and I can tell you right now, within 1 minute, you're back aerobic, meaning you're efficient. You're looking across the octagon or the ring at your opponent, you're walking out going, I've more energy than you. I'm back aerobic. And that's a parameter we track when we look at retesting. So your percentage recovery has gone up 20% in 8 weeks. You've become a more efficient athlete. Yeah. Your stroke volume has increased, i.e. the content of blood leaves the heart in one beat. Why has it gone up? Because we're performing more aerobically. We're allowing for this to adapt. So heart rate elevation and recovery is vitally important. If someone's heart rate's not recovering, they're in trouble.
Yeah.
So as much as elevation is important, recovery is important as well.
Okay.
So if you come into me and I'm like, look, your recoveries aren't good enough, it's because you're overloaded. Are you always doing anaerobic training? Yeah. Or the other way is, have you just done aerobic base training with no stimulus through anaerobic? Yeah, how do you know? Because your recovery is not great, because there's not that stimulus. So we've pushed you to a level you've never been at in the last 12 weeks.
Yeah. And
your recovery is not there. So we can interpret that as well.
Okay. I want to pause on this point, because we did discuss this briefly just before we turned the mics on, but this is really close to my heart as well. And I'm sure anybody who's played sport at any level has seen this happen time and time and time again. It's a cultural thing. It's this, if you're not in the red, if you're not flogged, if you're not going balls to the wall every single time you train, go to the gym, go for a run, whatever it is, you're not training. And it's a psychology that builds up. And I've seen it a lot in elite athletes, but I see it at club level as well, and in every sport and every discipline. And a lot of coaches don't seem to understand this. They know, they've heard the word recovery, but they don't know what that means on a scientific level, what recovery actually means. So could you just speak to this a little bit more? If you're not giving yourself the chance to adapt, if you're flogging yourself all the time, if it's constant stress, you're not going to go where you want to go. You're not going to improve.
No, so kind of what we need to get to the bottom of now before we go into why is understanding what aerobic and anaerobic mean.
Yeah.
So we've two different energy systems. Theoretically, we're going to step in and out of both depending on what training or intensity that we're going to do. But let's understand what aerobic is. So aerobic means, and it's very simple, in Latin, with oxygen.
Yeah.
So with the presence of oxygen. I use the word for people to understand it. So air. Think about that. You're using air. So it means your body is creating energy with the presence of oxygen. So you're working at a rate low enough where you can inhale, fill the lungs into the bloodstream, heart pumps the blood to the worker muscles. You're efficient, you're durable, you don't break down, you don't produce massive amounts of byproduct, because the energy system or the fueling system at that point is fat. So when we're aerobic, the body can only utilize fat when oxygen is present. So this can come into play when we're looking at someone, and it's probably going a bit off topic, but Mary, who wants to drop weight, goes in and all she does is spinning. And it's done anaerobic, which is without oxygen. Fueling source at that point is carbohydrate. We'll tap into that later. Probably going a bit off topic straight away.
It's very relevant.
Yeah.
It is very relevant.
So what we do when we're aerobic is we do warm-up, cool-down, active recovery, and endurance running. Endurance/recovery running. Now, there is what's called aerobic glycolysis when we're aerobic. So that's a heart rate zone. It can vary for people. Let's say 20 beats is what we'd like it to look like. So you have what's called AET, which is an aerobic threshold identification. Anything below your aerobic threshold identification, your body's fully using fat at that point for fuel. If we look at an average human body, probably about 80,000 calories available from stored fat.
Nice. A lot.
If we look at storage capacity of glycogen, 2,000 calories.
Really?
500 grams.
Wow.
4 calories per gram. Okay?
Yeah.
So we start to think and look at it from a sports performance perspective. If you want to go run 100 mile, you ain't going to run it on 2,000 calories of glycogen. So look at the whole theory behind it. So aerobic, what happens, most people, is they go anaerobic for everything. They want to go hard, they want to push, they want to break a spread, they want to beat their friend. Traditional club cycles or runs, it becomes a pissing contest where who can go the fastest. So everybody is red. Anaerobic, again, Latin word means without oxygen. So people kind of get confused here. It's not that you're not breathing, but you're not utilizing oxygen as high as you were back when you were aerobic. So in the air, there's 20.8% oxygen. Average usage is about 4%. So we inhale 20.8, we exhale out 16.8. So we're aerobic, we're using 4% oxygen. When we turn anaerobic, we start to use less oxygen. The body's fueling system at that point then heavily relies on carbohydrate. So we'll touch on it again in terms of carbohydrate storage. Are you carb loading? What type of intensity you're doing? But when we're anaerobic, we're inefficient. We're inefficient because we're using glycogen. We're depleting it quite rapidly. We're developing oxygen debt. This is a big thing. Oxygen debt is the reason you slow down. Nothing else.
Yeah.
Well, there's going to be other issues, which I'll cover in a second, but what stops you from running is oxygen debt development. You physically can't perform anymore at the rate that you want because you're anaerobically, or you're in oxygen debt. When you're anaerobic as well, and one of the things that gets a bad rap that isn't really the cause of this is lactic acid. Lactic acid is a byproduct of functioning anaerobically. If you look at lactic as a molecule, it actually gets re-put back into the Krebs cycle, which is your energy cycle. Yeah. It's the body's response to lactic acid accumulation. The body will release hydrogen ions, it will release bicarbonate to buffer and to dilute the acidity that's created in the blood. What the hydrogen ions do is they slow muscle contraction and expansion down. So you start to cramp, you're more susceptible to injury. Your oxygen debt development is there. Your glycogen dependency is now empty because you are running at this level for too long. The body's under consistent stress and strain and then says, you know what, Dan?
Shut down.
Let's stop here, bud.
Yeah.
So you have an athlete that does their long stuff too fast, their short stuff too fast. They go and do spinning. They do no aerobic training. So all they're doing is consistently staying anaerobic. So where this will resonate with people, if you look at a 5K runner or a 10K runner where their times aren't changing, but they feel better, you're running too fast all the time. Yeah. So the magic happens when we're aerobic. Stimulate anaerobic, adapt aerobic. So you stimulate growth in capacity. Intervals, less than 60 seconds, will stimulate growth in VO2, will stimulate theoretical growth in threshold, but threshold will grow when we're aerobic. If you can increase the body's output of power or speed, you become more economical runner. So running economy is going to be better. So if you can run faster for less effort, you're going to win. So what makes people good endurance athletes, or I argue a lot, and people disagree with it, I argue anything less than, or anything greater than 400 meters, runners will benefit from aerobic growth training.
Yeah, and I've heard that before and I agree with it. But
So if you can perform higher for longer, you're going to win.
Yeah.
In all sports, if we can grow aerobic capacity, if we grow aerobic output, so the faster you can perform economically, i.e. working with oxygen, the better you're going to perform. Yeah. So if you're always overstimulated anaerobic, there's no phase of adaptation. So people get, let's bring it back then to using your standard method, 220 minus your age, 180 minus your age, and they go, that's not working. And then they go out and they run, my long runs are done at 160, my fast runs are done at 170. And I'm like, okay, well, where's your aerobic stuff done? So growth occurs when you're aerobic. If you're always anaerobic, there's not going to be a phase of adaptation.
Yeah.
So everybody wants to go red, 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 red. Constant stress. When you start to mix red with green, yellow with green, just green. So green, I would work with 4 zones, all right? Some people work with 5 zones. I have people that come into me and tell me they work with 8 zones. It doesn't matter. You have to ask yourself, and people have to take personal responsibility on this. I'm into my running now. Every time I leave my house, there's a tree outside my door, and I look at it and go, okay, what's the objective of this session? Is it aerobic or is it anaerobic? Okay, it's aerobic. I need to keep my heart rate under 160 or 150 or whatever my numbers are. Or if it's anaerobic, okay, my average heart rate needs to be this. Okay, what is my session going to be? So today I'm going to go out and I'm going to do a tempo session. What's a tempo session? A tempo session is uncomfortably comfortable. So between 1 to 40 minutes of an effort. You could do 2-minute efforts, kilometer repeats, 3K, 5K, 8K, whatever it is. And the idea behind that session is to develop resistance to fatigue. So you need to know what it feels like to be under this pressure.
Okay.
Interval training is never done right. People come into me and go, I did an 8-minute interval. No, you didn't. You did an 8-minute tempo. Because if you're doing interval training correctly, you physically cannot do it for greater than 60 seconds. If you can do it for greater than 60 seconds, you're not working hard enough. Yeah. So my athletes, I would do 15 by 15. So 15 seconds, max effort with 15 times. It is sick.
It sounds sick.
Okay. Now
what's the recovery in the...
Okay, so that's a really good point. What makes interval training so successful is the variables that we can look at. So a great acronym is the word DIRTY. Distance, intervals, or repetitions, time, and I'll have to get you the last one. I'll come back onto it. But there's so many variables in an interval session. So what time frame you're going to put your effort on? Are you going to do an active recovery? Are you going to do a static recovery? How low is your heart rate going to recover for? So what's really, really vital, and this is something that I met with massive resistance on, is you have to allow your heart rate to get back aerobic on an interval. So you go red zone for less than 60 seconds, allow adequate recovery to get back to green. If you do a static recovery that drops your heart rate to blue, you're never going to get back to red on your time frame. Okay. If you go red, and this is one thing that resonates with a lot of people, you go red, don't allow enough recovery, you go yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red. That's not interval training because that's anaerobic. You're permanently anaerobic. Interval training should look aerobic, anaerobic, aerobic. One interval.
Okay.
Repeat, repeat, repeat. As you progress through this 15 by 15, your recovery is going to take longer. So what was was a 35-second recovery on rep 1, 2, and 3, it's now a 45-second recovery. By the end of 15 rep, you could be 1 minute and 10 waiting to get back into that green zone.
Okay.
So you have to be really clear on the objective of the session.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're doing. And the way you know is you have to know your numbers. So if you don't know your numbers and you're just working off a formula, you might as well not be using heart rate training.
Yeah.
Heart rate training works really, really well when you get tested. Let's look at it from a different perspective of, I want to run a marathon. Okay, Seán, I want to run a marathon in 3:30. They come in to me. I know for somebody to run a 3:30 marathon, they have to run 5-minute kilometers for 42 kilometers. Yeah. They come in to me, their threshold identification, so anaerobic threshold will get identified. What we'd ideally like is at 12 kilometers an hour, which is a 5-minute kilometer. And they go, okay, I want to run at 3:30. I'm like, well, your thresholds come in today at a 5:36 or a 5:40. So your pace at your long runs isn't right at the moment. Oh, no, I run 4:36s on my long runs. You're running too fast. No, I'm not. I'm like, you are. Okay, have you hit your 3:30? No, why? What happens? I just can't get over the last 4 miles. And I'll switch between miles and kilometers as I talk about this. I just always implode on the last 4 miles of a race. Why do you think that is? Because you're anaerobic. You need to listen to what I'm saying. People don't look at the bigger picture. 42 kilometers, a 5-minute kilometers, is a 3:30 marathon.
It's just basic maths, yeah.
Yeah, but what people want is they're not looking at, they're like, I can run 10K in 43 minutes. I'm like, okay.
So they're thinking they could just scale that up.
Yeah, that's a 4-minute 30 kilometer. Great, well done. Speak to me at 20K, 30K, 40K.
Yeah.
It's not the same. So building aerobic capacity takes discipline. And it's something that people aren't willing to do.
Yeah.
Now is a fantastic time. I'm working with a group of triathletes who have a great coach called Kyo Fit. And when I approached Mick Kyo about this, he said to me, whatever you say, Seán, we're going to do. So he had the buy-in as a coach. And he understood the science and the terminology and everything why we wanted to do it. We did all their run tests and we did all their bike tests. So triathletes, their data will differ. VO2 is going to be similar. Max heart rate could be quite similar. But thresholds are going to be completely different. Okay. So you might run at 160 threshold and you bike at 148. Or you might bike at 168. So just the assumption that you're going to have a higher or lower threshold at a certain discipline won't work. So they were like, well, we don't have any events. We don't have to go out and flog ourselves. We're looking at this bigger picture. I tested these guys in, I think, early September, maybe even late August. And I put up a thing on my Instagram the other day about one of the athletes who has increased his pace by about 36 seconds a kilometre. And his heart rate is the same. So his heart rate at 163 was running a 5:12, I think, kilometre. Now he's running a 4:36 because he slowed his aerobic base training down. So his stroke volume went up, i.e. his heart rate, the content of oxygen that leaves the heart or content of blood that leaves the heart won't beat increased. So he's now fueling the system better with oxygen for longer, but no change in heart rate because the heart rate doesn't need to work as hard.
Yeah.
I always ask people to buy into it for 6 to 8 weeks. And it can be really, really frustrating where they're getting overtaken by 60-year-olds or they're getting... I split up running partners, unfortunately. because Mary and John can't run together anymore because John runs faster. He has a higher aerobic capacity. His breakdown speeds are higher. You can do your tempos and your intervals together, but your long runs can't be done together. Go out with a slower running group. One of the most detrimental things to performance is people wanting to run faster all the time. And ask yourself, are you recovering? You should come back off an aerobic green run and go, that was fine. You should talk the whole way through it. You should come back and go, I don't really feel like I trained today. And that's perfect, because that day you drink more water, you get more sleep, you eat more greens. Success happens in a state of rest. Success happens when we're aerobic. Adaptation happens when we're aerobic. Look at sleep as a performance enhancer. If you could sell sleep, it'd be the best-selling drug in the world. Oh, yeah. So we're in a complete state of rest. We're aerobic fully. If we adapt it across, I know it's not the exact same thing, but when you go out and run aerobically, you will adapt. You will get better. It will be frustrating, but trust the process. And in 6 or 8 weeks' time, you'll be running better than you've ever ran before, because your body has adapted. You've become more economical. And that's the theory behind testing. That's why we need to identify this. So going off standard formulas doesn't work. Them generic formulas don't work. It's about getting your numbers specific to you. So if you're stuck in a rut at the moment, you're either understimulating or consistently overstimulating. So look at it the other way. You have someone that always runs their heart rate based on generic formulas. So 220 minus your age multiplied by X, Y, and Z. So you have someone that goes at 75% of heart rate 180 just because that's their formula, and it says their run should be done at 135. They're basically cantering, jogging. Yeah. I get them tested. I'm like, your threshold's not coming into 162. Probably giving them about 3 kilometers an hour faster to run. So they're constantly understimulating. They're like, well, I can run at that pace. Did a triathlon club recently down in Cork, Crosshaven Triathlon Club. And the guy that organised it all, Aidan, really bought into his data, knew his stuff, but never got tested. And he was like, okay, I'm running at, let's say 140. I can't remember his specific numbers. He came in, I was like, you can actually run at 163. So I tested him on a Friday. And on a Sunday, he came into me. I was still there in the weekend. And he was like, oh, Seán, do you have a minute? And I was like, oh, what's up, Blake? He's like, I just want to talk to you. He's like, I went out and I ran 163. And I'm in bits. And I'm like, man, you can't just go out and just because Seán says you can do it. It's about growing it. So average, slightly average heart rate, slightly average heart rate, slightly average heart rate, and look at the theory. If you're understimulating on your intervals and your tempos, you're not stimulating growth in capacity. So if you think you're running anaerobic in a tempo session, you could be aerobic. Yeah. And then race day comes in, you're doing a 5K, you're aiming at a sub 25K for a PB, and you implode. Why have you imploded, or why have you blown up? You've blown up because you're not used to dealing with anaerobic negatives, i.e. lactic acid, oxygen debt development, increase in ventilation, all of that comes with it. Yeah. So like it's such a unique science within itself to understand stimulation in training. 9 times out of 10, people go too hard. Yeah. All the time.
There's a few real nuggets of gold in what you've just explained to us there, and I'm going to go back through them just briefly before we.
I was about to say, I probably covered too much.
No, not at all, not at all. But the one thing I will do is I'll just clarify for some people. Like, there's a lot of numbers and figures there that sound scary. I'm 32 years of age, right, and I've been playing sport, not at a elite or a particularly high level, Division 1 club football and stuff like that. But all my life, it's been a huge part of my life. But I've been involved in the behind the scenes stuff, from the medical side, from the sports physiology, all that kind of stuff, and only now. And this is why I'm really excited having this conversation. Only now am I starting to acknowledge the importance of testing myself to find out where I am. Because for every single one of those years, I hated being tested. And I suffered the same thing for all those years. I'm sure probably about 80 to 90% of people listening to this suffer, is that I never made massive improvements in any specific area because I didn't know what the hell was happening on the inside. I would train, I'd flog myself, I'd take it easy, I'd lift heavy, I'd lift light, I'd run far, I'd run short. But I never really noticed improvement in all those areas. I'd have coaches that had absolutely flogged the life out of you. I'd have coaches that would do nothing, but nothing really worked the way I thought it should work based on the amount of effort I was putting in, because I wasn't testing, and I hated being tested because I was real competitive. I didn't want to be tested because I was afraid my number would be lower than the next fella's number. Yeah. So I always hated it. And now I'm starting to see, only recently, listening to people like yourself explain this, when you have that uncomfortable moment of this is where you are, and I mean, you have this, you smiled when we said this earlier on, because you have this conversation with everybody and they tell you this is where I am, Seán, you're like, actually, this is where you are. That's not a nice thing for people to hear, but when you absorb that information and you use it, it's like anything else. When you acknowledge I am this weight, or I run this fast, or I am this whatever, when you acknowledge that is the point that you are right now in time, then you have somewhere to go. Then you have something that you can do with that information and knowledge. So like all of the stuff about threshold and VO2 and heart rate and all this kind of stuff, people listen to that and it sounds real scary, and I don't want to do that, and the thoughts of doing a VO2. But when you have that information, it's like going and getting comprehensive bloods done in the doctor. I don't know what's going on the inside. But when you get past that stigma and you actually go and figure out, and you get the numbers and you get the data, and you have someone like yourself that says, right, here's where we are. But I'm not just going to tell you where we are. I'm going to tell you how we get closer to where you want to be. And it's not the same for me, because I'm a GA player, as it is for a marathon runner, as it is for Mary, who's just doesn't do enough exercise and sits on the couch. But what I love about this is it's applicable to everybody, because you can take all these numbers and all of this data and all this science, and you can then actively track where you're going. And I know people are interested in this, because we talked about Fitbits, and we'll talk about the algorithms and stuff now in a sec, but we talked about a lot of people are wearing this stuff now, so they're starting to become a little bit more interested, but they're not interpreting the data right. And as you've explained to me, it's grossly inaccurate, a lot of the stuff.
It is. The one I love most is when someone comes in and tells me they scored a 62 VO2 max because their watch told them, and I'm like, your watch isn't connected to your lungs. So they'll disagree with my data. Yeah, I'm like, how? Why? Where are you getting it from? Break it down what a VO2 predictor is on a watch. It's an average based on testing that a company did. So they might get 40, 50 males, the same age, height, weight as you, and based on the paces that you're running, what was their average VO2?
Yeah.
But it's probably not even taking weight into consideration. It's just looking at time and pace.
Yeah.
You know, or using the numbers. I worked with... This time last year, we ran trials for a company that designs algorithms for a lot of these wearables, and the guys told me themselves that the watches or some of the wearables can be up to 40% inaccurate.
That's outrageous. 40. You may as well just throw the thing out. Could you just, because I know this and you know this, but you could explain, because many people don't actually understand that there's an algorithm, there's a kind of a complicated formula guessing essentially based on a wide range of factors what the number it's going to show you on the screen is. So like when you look at these numbers on your screen, it's giving you predictors based on populations and stuff like that.
Well, it depends what you want to use them for. So the VO2 we know is inaccurate. I think that they have a very important role. I never knew if I wanted a Fitbit or not. I got one recently.
I'm wearing one now as well, by the way, just for full clarification.
I have it on. What does it do for me? On an average day, I could take about 25 to 30,000 steps, right? In that whole day, if I haven't moved 250 steps in 1 hour, my watch will beep. I'll get up and I'll walk. I track my sleep a bit more. I'm tuning into it a bit more. Like if I go to bed at 10 o'clock and I get up at 8, I think, lovely, I've had 10 hours sleep. But my watch tells me I had 5 hours 46. Now, I don't necessarily agree with them on that much, but my issue with them is accuracy. We wear them too loose. Male might have too much hair on their skin. Their female might have moisturizer and tan on. The accuracy of them is not going to work for heart rate tracking. Okay.
Which is what most people actually use them for.
Absolutely.
In a training capacity.
Now, I've never had the experience of using the likes of the Whoop or the rings that have come out. I've heard better things about them. But you have to take the specific accuracy on heart rate tracking with a bit of a pinch of salt. Like over the 10 years, probably in the last 5 years, they've become really, really accurate. A lot more prevalent with people that come into me. And based on predicted VO2s and predicted thresholds, maybe 1 in every 100 or 200 people, they might be right. And it might just be look at the draw.
Stop clocking on
and
that,
then all of a sudden, John goes and tells his mate that his watch was the best, and John's mate goes and buys a watch because John's mate, and then the accuracy of the data is way off. There's so many variables at play when we look at a wearable. It's using electrodes or light emitting diodes to measure variances in blood flow and things like that. Like there's just so many differences to go on. Even on step counters and stuff, they're great because of, like, we want people to move more, but again, like, what are you doing with your hand? Like, are you writing? Are you chopping stuff? You know, like there's
I'll tell you this, I have a little cheat code. I ride a motorbike. When I come back off a 20-minute ride in a motorbike, I've done 26,000 steps.
Okay, yeah.
And I haven't walked anywhere.
Yeah. Or my dad, he won't listen to this, but over lockdown 1, he got really into counting his steps. Mad. Like, he's always been into his fitness, 69 years of age. But if you looked at him, you think he's in his 50s, you know.
Okay.
And where we live at the bottom of the Dublin Mountains, and he's a friend up the mountain. So we got into the habit of walking up to him and then walk to the shop, do this. And then all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to start to cycle. Didn't he start to put the phone in his sock so he could start to track his steps, you know? I was like, Dad, would you stop? So people get really into it.
That's a positive byproduct. Sorry to cut you off. Of these straps, inaccuracies and all that aside, more people are, because I know loads of people who got them and they're just trying to get their 10,000 steps.
Yeah.
And before, whether it's accurate or not, before they were getting 800 steps.
Yeah.
And now they're getting roughly 8 to 10,000 steps.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Like I was saying off air, unfortunately, I did contract the COVID-19, you know, so I was in isolation in my son's room. And what I said to myself was that every single time I got a phone call, I was going to walk. Now, I'm on the phone a lot in general. I'm one of these people that likes to stay in contact with people. If I haven't spoken to you in 2 years, I would have no problem picking the phone up and ringing you.
Yeah.
Now, I do a lot of business work as well on the phone. I'm one of these people, again, if you send me an email, I'm going to ring you. So every time I made a point, and I was doing 15,500 steps a day in my son's room.
I misheard you when you told me this before, and you were like, I started doing 15,000 steps a day. I was like, that's great. And you're like, no, in the room, in the bedroom.
So I will never accept anyone telling me that they can't do 10,000 steps a day.
Yeah.
I understand we're working from home, but using them as a step counter, as a guide for you to say, or what I did get into the habit of one day, or I was in the room because we ended up all contracting it, unfortunately, so I could come out of isolation on my own. But I was on my isolation on my own for about 6 days. And I said every morning, first thing I get up, I do 1,000 steps. You know?
Yeah.
Just simple little things like that.
Yeah.
Now, I understand people work in environments where they have to sit down, but have a cup of water rather than a bottle, so you have to get up and fill it up a bit more every 15 or every hour, go for a walk, whatever. We're slightly getting off topic. In terms of the accuracy of them, they're great. They do provide a lot of benefits with that, but take the predicted zones with a pinch of salt.
Okay, yeah.
If you are serious about heart rate training, get a strap. So the straps are
like a chest strap.
Yeah, a chest strap. Now, over the years, I was met with, and over the years, it's been funny to see the change in heart rate straps. Like, I'll name the brands because Garmin, Polar are your leading brands. Yeah. Garmin have created one. They own the brand Wahoo. So Wahoo have come out as a slightly cheaper alternative to Garmin. Like the old Garmin straps were like rigid, solid plastic that would stick into your ribs. Like they would hurt.
I've had a few of them on,
Yeah, the new straps, the Polars, the Garmins, the Wahoos, they're waterproof. Female clients, just before we break up, a female client of mine went home with the heart rate strap on, and it took about 5 hours for me to realise it was missing. She still had it on when I contacted her.
Didn't realise.
No, they're so comfortable. Now, they have to be fitted right. Heart rate straps, again, where the inaccuracy comes with them is if they're not tight enough. So the only time I have issues with heart rate monitors is when I don't fit them.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so generally, depending on the female, a female won't be comfortable with me fitting them, so they'll fit them themselves. I would always say skin tight under the bra strap, sports bra.
Yeah.
So sports bra will keep it held against your skin.
Yeah.
Putting it under the sports bra can be dangerous because it can twist. So if the whole electrode or the plastic part of the strap isn't touching the skin, we get inaccuracy. If it's a pickup that unclips, it could unclip but could be still touching the button, you'll get, again, inaccuracy on it. Or if they're just simply too loose.
Okay.
You need to make sure you know you're wearing them. Throw a bit of water on the back of them. If you're a male, that's a really, really hairy chest. Some people will shave just where it sits, or you could just buy an electrode gel. Like I have people come in and go, no, heart rate straps don't work on me. I go, why? They're like, it's your own strap. They spit on it or they lick it or they throw a bit of water on it. Like it's crazy. But if I put a strap on someone and it's not picking up, I'll stop the test and I have electrode gel. Like a bottle of electrode gel costs about €7 on Amazon or on one of the online platforms. You could get it and just put a bit of electrode gel on it.
You've got a conductive surface then, yeah.
Done.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're serious, Christmas is coming up. If you're serious about heart rate training, get yourself a good heart rate monitor. Now, if you spend peanuts, you'll get monkeys.
Yeah.
So if a watch comes up in a supermarket or a strap-on watch come up for a supermarket for 20 quid, it's not going to really do the job.
What are you realistically looking at for something?
Okay, so all my equipment is Polar.
Okay.
You'll be looking at, so you have to remember as well, if you get a chest strap, you're going to need something to read it off. Yeah. I personally don't like looking at my phone when I'm running. If you're training in a stagnant position, i.e. on a turbo, in a gym, in a Muay Thai or in a boxing setting where you can have an iPad or something in the distance that can pick your heart rate up, you don't need the watch. So a good heart rate strap would probably cost you about 80, 90 euro.
Okay.
120 would be max.
Yeah.
Then if you want a watch on top of that, that's where the money's going to come in.
Okay.
Now, so the likes of Garmin would be more expensive for their wearables because they want to earn more money.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they're not there for your health. They're there as a company to make revenue.
Yeah.
So they'll say this watch has all the bells and whistles, but I don't care what time it is in Africa. I just want to know what my heart rate is.
Yeah, yeah.
So get a basic model that tracks your heart rate. If you want GPS on it, you're going to spend a bit more money, yada, yada, yada. If you want to put all your data up on Strava. That's one of the things recently with that triathlon group I was talking about is people's runs on Strava didn't start to go up anymore because they were like, oh, they're going to see that I'm pacing at a different pace.
Yeah.
But you'll be probably looking at about, like, to get a good watch and strap, 180 to 200 euro.
Okay.
Like it's not going to break the bank. It's well worth the investment. But I understand if it's something that people can't afford, I would then say, well, let's get the strap on its own and have your phone in your pocket.
Yeah.
Not really going to work for long distance running. However, you'll start to get comfortable pacing. So pacing is an issue for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what heart rate does, you get people in and go, okay, what's your splits in your kilometers? 436, 510, 440. You're like, what is going on here? Now you need to start to learn to pace. So that comes into play then.
Yeah. Just a little break from the podcast to remind you that my guest today is Seán Kinane from Health Matters, and we're discussing VO2 max testing, aerobic fitness, how to train, why we train, how your body consumes and uses oxygen, and much, much more. If you want to get in touch, you can shoot me an email at podcast@prymal.ie. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at PrymalPro, PRYMALPRO. And you can check out the show notes for this episode over at www.prymal.ie/health matters. Let's just talk about that for a second, because I'm your prime example here, and a load of people are exactly the same as me. Never ever. Now I wasn't super competitive or anything like that. I ran cross country when I was in school, so I've a bit of experience with distance running. I played Gaelic football, but hate going long distance running now, because I have absolutely no idea how to pace. And how I pace myself is it really, really, really hurting? Back it off a couple of percent and stay there for a while. I've no idea. If you looked at my kilometre times now, they'd be up and down like a yo-yo. I've no idea. And like I said a few minutes ago, now I'm very, very aware that there's almost no point if I want to actually improve my times and my capacity and all that, training that way, going out and intuitively guessing, is this the pace? So getting something like this might sound like, I'm not looking to run a marathon, like why would I get a strap? But for anybody who's in a position where they enjoy running and they want to actually improve. Now, some people don't. They just go and they run because it's a leisure activity for them. No problem. Absolutely no problem. This isn't a preaching session about you have to get a VO2 max test done or anything like that.
Well, health matters.
Well, health matters, yeah. But if you're interested in improving, which I am, and I know a lot of people are, if it's for your sport or for yourself, in improving in, let's call it your 5k time at the moment, just as an easy one to look at, 180 to 200 euro investment in yourself. A decent pair of shoes is going to cost you that much as well. It is going to be something that could help you achieve your goal, and you're investing in your health. You could easily spend 180, 200 quid a weekend on drinks and takeaways and food and stuff like that. So I'm always trying, because like your information is just phenomenal and it's so in depth. I'm always trying to help filter that to people who think it's not relevant to them, because this is relevant to a huge amount of people, not just elite athletes.
Like a simple way to look at it is from a pacing perspective. Your Polar app will tell you every kilometre what pace you're running and what your heart rate is. And
this is the big sell for people. It's probably going to be easier for you.
Well, you're probably
not going to struggle so much
that
with
point
your
that
5Ks.
What you made there is, so when I started running, it was like, okay, if I go off too hard, I can't do 5k.
Yeah. I'm the same.
So what is the again, asking yourself, what's the objective of the run? So most times I'd say to someone, if you're doing an aerobic run, if the objective of the run is aerobic, you're looking to do 40 minutes. Okay?
So this is are we talking about 5k here?
Let's forget distance for a minute.
Okay, we're just talking about the
just for a minute,
principles.
all right?
Okay,
so if you wanted to go out, so ask yourself, why do you want to do 5k? Okay, so what's the objective? What is that number? Why do you have that on a pedestal?
Yeah.
Because everyone wants to do 5k.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to do it at a certain time. But if you don't care about your time to do a 5k, if you want to just complete 5k, you need to go out and do it comfortably. Walk 1k, jog 1k. All of a sudden, you're jogging 2K, you're jogging 3K. All of a sudden, you've come back and whoever's at home goes, you don't even look like you trained. Yeah, because I've done it aerobically. All my kilometers were 550s or 520s or whatever pace suits you. So you have to have your own why.
Yeah.
Why? What is the objective? The clarity on the objective is more important, I think. So is this session going to be uncomfortable, anaerobic, or is it going to be comfortable aerobic? So apply it on a lower scale and a higher scale. If you're a good athlete that does decent running, I would ask you to do at least 40 minutes aerobic.
Okay.
That's realistic. So I say if it's greater than 40 minutes, so your long runs, aerobic. Your 10K is on the limit for a lot of people. Is it too fast? Is it too slow?
Yeah.
Your tempo sessions are between 1 to 40 minutes. So you go out and do kilometer repeats, a 5K effort. You should feel uncomfortable. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
It is not the most enjoyable thing in the world, but you can do it. So it's building resistance to negatives associated with anaerobic pathways.
But it's not about going out and feeling uncomfortable for 5K every time you do it and hoping that every time you do it, you're a couple of seconds
No,
faster.
because remember, when you're doing a 5K, what you're going to do is you're going to be able to deal with the negatives. It's not going to get you a point where you have to stop.
Yeah.
If you're getting to a point 3.5K in, you're simply running too fast. Take 10 seconds off. Be more comfortable for you.
Yeah.
Per kilometre. How do you know it? You have an earphone in your head that says, Seán, you just ran a 4:36.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's my pace. 4:36, 4:37, 4:32. And then last kilometre, you're like, okay, I want to get lower. You take your pace up. Your paces are said to you in your ear. It's based off your heart rate. You know your threshold. Average heart rate's 160. Again, I'm just using that as an average because it's in my head for some reason, 160. It's perfect. So you're getting constant feedback loop, or you have a watch. Glance at your watch.
Yeah.
What's your heart rate? What's your habit? And then, like anything else, pacing becomes a creation of habit, a creation of repetition. You know what it feels like to run a 4:36.
Yeah.
And then you're sub 25 minutes on a 5K. All of a sudden, the aims keep going. Okay, now I need to average 4:10 to get myself sub 21, sub 22, whatever. You know what I mean? You start to tune into it a bit more. So you start to pay attention to your numbers. Objectively, you understand what you're doing. So like last night, I had a tough session yesterday, working with some professional athletes. I physically took part in it, so I can get away with that.
What's the sport?
Muay Thai.
Oh, Muay Thai, okay.
Yeah, you know, so with all restrictions and stuff on at the moment, we're allowed to train professionally with them. And I trained hard, like really hard. And this morning, before coming out here, I was like, all I'm going to do today is probably an aerobic walk.
Okay.
So you have to listen to your body.
Yeah.
Because I know adaptation isn't going to happen if I go and flog myself again. Or am I more susceptible to get injured now if I went and did another anaerobic session? So this is where listening to your body comes into play. Heart rate variability comes into play.
Yeah.
So measuring your heart rate in the morning is something I'll touch on in a second with you. So if I know, so today's going to be an aerobic session for me, recovery session, I'm going to go out of my way to have a higher consumption of water, eat more quality food, and get better sleep today. And then I'll be ready for the next day. So using heart rate measurement or heart rate variability in the morning, it's getting into the habit of tracking your heart rate. So a lot of my athletes will send me their heart rates in the morning. Simple number, let's say your average heart rate's 50. 50, 50, 50, 51, 53. And on Friday, I get a message, Seán, my heart rate's at 68. Like, whoa, what's on your plan? Right, you're due for a sparring session, an interval session.
Yeah.
Or you're due for double intervals or tempo and interval. I'm like, no, you're pulled. You're not doing any of that. You're going for a walk or you're going for a light aerobic cycle. You're getting more sleep. Tell me your heart rate in the morning. Okay. Bang, back down to 50.
Really, yeah.
Okay, let's go.
When you're telling that athlete that, how are they feeling? Do they feel good, or do they kind of?
Some of them will say.
Some
of them will say, "No, I feel great. I feel great." I'm like, "Yeah, well, most of my athletes now I'm working with long term, so they trust the process." A lot of the athletes, their head coach has given me permission to do this.
Okay,
as well.
Yeah,
you know,
so which is massively important in the context.
So
of sports,
we link in. So like I know my area. Like I don't claim to know it all. As a run coach, as an example, I'm not a run coach. I provide your data to a run coach.
Okay.
I provide your data to a cycling coach who uses science. So they will then go, okay, here's your numbers provided by Seán. Here's your aim, goals and experience. Now let's build a plan.
Yeah.
When we work with MMA athletes or boxers, the head coaches will say, Seán is going to look after your conditioning. I'll liaise with them. I'll text the head coach and say, such and such, I disagree that they should perform X, Y, and Z. Fine.
Yeah.
Let's pull them off it. And it's not about chasing back that session either. That's something that people do. Oh, I was supposed to do 2 tempos last week. I didn't do it, so I'm going to do 2 tempos on a Sunday, interval tempo Monday.
Doesn't work that way.
No,
Yeah.
let the session go. It's one missed session is going to do nothing compared to recovery.
Yeah.
It's like when someone comes into me, so with the VO2 test, a 2-hour fast, no food, tea, coffee, or any stimulants 2 hours prior to testing, no exercise on the day. And if you're training the day before, take it easy or take it off. What? I can't train the day before? No. No, I'm going to train the day before, Seán. All right?
It's going to scale
your numbers are going to... I can't miss out on an interval session. The benefit of coming into me fresh will far outweigh what that interval session is going to do.
Yeah.
The benefit of adapting, slowing down, listening to the body, listening to our measurements, understanding why we need to aerobic will far outweigh going out and chasing your mate who's 30 seconds faster than you per kilometre.
Yeah.
So listening and understanding and buying into the whole theory on less is more is just so important. And you shouldn't feel guilty on it. Give it 6 or 8 weeks, you'll be running faster, you'll have less injuries, you'll be more economical, and your times from a sports performance endurance perspective will start to decrease.
Yeah.
You know, like if anyone's listening that wants to see any of the proof of this, go onto my social media. A lot of people will tag me in their runs, PB, where they were stuck in a rut for a year. All it is application of science to specific personalized data.
Yeah.
And you can't argue with science.
You literally can't argue with it. No. I remember seeing, was it one of the Pumping Iron documentaries? And again, I said to you before, I've always been big on this, the importance of recovery. And people mistake training smart for not training hard enough.
Yeah.
And there are some people, when you tell them you don't have to be in the red zone in every single session you do, and in fact you shouldn't be in it, they take that and they go the other way with it, and they don't do enough then. So it is about a balance. You still have to work really, really hard, but you have to apply the science, like you've just said, that understand, test, or you're guessing. That's another phrase people use. You don't know what you're doing. And I remember watching this documentary, and I cannot remember. I don't think it was Phil Heath, but it was one of the new up and coming bodybuilders in the Arnie era. Had stopped just going and doing 10-hour sessions and flogging himself all the time. Now, don't get me wrong, you're bound to get some sort of adaptation, but it doesn't mean it's the best form of adaptation. Like if you're training 10 hours a day, something's going to happen. So
I hope.
But what he started to do was he started to work with scientists and sports scientists and data analysts, and he started to understand the times when he was ripe and prepared for growth and for training and for strength training, and with the times when, and you said it there, he should just go for a walk. And in the community, he was ridiculed, and I'm probably butchering the details of this, but it applies really well to everything else. He was ridiculed because you're going for a walk, you should be doing another 10-hour training session, pal. And he's like, no, my body's not ready for that. And he did really, really well. And I remember seeing that and thinking at the time, I play Gaelic football, thinking at the time some of the training sessions or the training periods are like this traditional sports cycle you generally get with a field sport. Pre-season, flog the nuts off absolutely everybody. The next 9 months, do nothing. Pre-season, flog the nuts off everybody. Injuries, low performance. You're looking at groups of people who you know have massive potential in their field and their sport. They're underperforming consistently, and you're like, why is this happening over and over and over again? And then you start, and in my case, it was I just started to apply very small principles of what you're talking about. Very small. As I said, I was allergic to testing. I didn't really test that much, but I started to recover a little bit more. And when my body wasn't feeling good, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to be lazy, but I won't go in and look for that PB on whatever the deadlift or whatever it might be. I won't go for that run. And I started to improve, and I was like, hold on a sec, I'm doing a little bit less and I'm getting better. But it's a cultural issue in Ireland anyway. You've worked all over the world and you've experienced all over the world, but in Ireland it's definitely an issue and a cultural issue with if you're not being flogged, you're not doing enough, you're not hardy enough. And there is an element, a very small element of you need mental toughness and discipline and an ability to push through discomfort to be successful at things. But realistically, if I'm a football player and you're a marathon runner, and like I talk to people all the time who do incredible things, like they run 200 miles and they row across the Atlantic. If you're doing that, you gotta do something a little bit different. But it's still based in science. But if you're most of us, there is a formula for this, and you need to buy in. You've said buy in a couple of times there. That's what I feel is missing: an education and a buy in from people that I actually. It's very hard for me to believe you when you say I shouldn't run that hard today. I can actually take it a little bit easier and run at this pace. But when I buy in, the changes and the adaptation you notice and the improvements you notice are incredible, and you're not killing yourself all the time. You probably enjoy it a little bit more. Everything starts to improve. You start to hit your PBs. It's magic, really, what starts to happen.
It's the education post-testing. You know, like doing a test is grand. It's what's successful, what I think, and the feedback for me, what makes my company successful is the deliverance of the data to educate the client.
Yeah.
So empowering them to understand what is going on and why it's not being successful, you know, and just making sure that they understand. And that you're right, though, the buy-in is crucial. You can look at it from two phases. We need buy-in on uncomfortable sessions, and we need buy-in on easy sessions.
Yeah.
You know, and one won't work without the other. And for not 1 second am I saying everybody has to slow down. I believe that you have to do your intervals probably harder than you're doing them. You do your tempos well, but allow your body this adaptation phase, which is aerobic based training, and not for 1 second should you feel guilty about this.
Yeah.
Not for one. You come back and you're not in a bundle and your body isn't aching and you're not sweating. I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's what I want to hear. I want a steady heart rate, comfortable throughout. Or one of the big things people do is the first kilometre, boom, they're gone.
100 miles
you know
an hour,
what I mean? And then they're like, oh, I can never get through anything, you know. Aoife Cook, who I happily or delighted to say that I know well from working with her. Aoife Cook's the Dublin Marathon current record or winner. She talked great about this whole theory, and when I interviewed her recently on my Instagram, she said a marathon is a 20-mile warm-up with a 10k race.
Yeah.
Like if you think about that theory, that for 20 miles you're just trucking along, and then last 6 miles or 10k, whatever you want to phrase it in, you're gone. So your negative splits should be that way. Like you should run a marathon, your second half should be faster than your first half.
Yeah.
You know, you're gone out, you're aerobic. Keep bringing it back. You're aerobic. Your fueling system is endless. You're not going to run out of that energy. You know, and we'll come on to the energy source in a second. One thing I wanted to bring back, though, when you were talking there, I recently listened to your interview with Robbie Bennett on kind of insulin, hormonal response, cortisol. And one of the things as well, that this could resonate with a lot of people that are struggling to lose weight, high stressful job, go in, do high stressful training. Anaerobic.
Yeah.
Cortisol.
Yeah.
Can't sleep, irregular cravings. Fueling point of that system as well is carbohydrate. So bring it back. Look at your bodybuilders. How they do an hour walking. Why do they do an hour walking? Because you burn calories directly from stored fat.
Yeah.
You speak to a lot of bodybuilders. I interviewed Tommy Staunton recently.
Gent.
And he was like, an hour of cardio a day is crucial. Just walking. Walk your dog. Walk on the treadmill. Why is it doing that? Because you're shredding, you're utilising body fat at that point.
Yeah.
So a lot of times people, when they're looking to train for weight loss, flog themselves, hormonally mess themselves up, deplete their carbohydrate stores. All they want then is replenishment of carbohydrate. Can't sleep, go back into work, repeat the process and go nowhere.
Yeah.
Now we know, and Owen and Robbie would have always spoke about it in the ISI about, and Larry Doyle as well. Recently I interviewed regards to the 3 S's, stress, sleep and shitting. Unless you have the 3 of them under control, weight is going to be very, very difficult to manage. And the more I get to work in the industry, if it's digestion's not right or stress is not right. So stress can be produced from a training perspective as well. So if there's too much stress in the body because you're always anaerobic, it's going to limit adaptation. It's going to limit success. So there's so many benefits to understanding it. Now, it's great. A lot of gyms, have you heard of MyZone? Have you seen MyZone?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
So a lot of West Park is one of the country leaders in this, so Health Matters is based in West Park Fitness. Everyone that joins up West Park gets a heart rate monitor. And all around
everyone who joins the gym gets a heart rate monitor.
Yeah. And all around the gym, there's big 50, 60 inch screens with everyone's heart rate on it. And they're classified blue, green, yellow or red. You know, so all their training intensities are measured. When they're teaching spin classes, they can go, all right, everyone into the red, because that's what spinning should be at certain points. Everyone stay in yellow. We're doing an FPT. We need you in yellow for 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You know, like, so it's endless in terms of the benefit on it. So it can work for everyone, heart rate training.
Application is really important though. Like this data is great. I have seen, it's not MyZone, but I've seen gyms and classes and stuff before done with the zones, but it's the same concept. Everyone needs to be in the red. Everyone needs to be in the red. And everyone's looking at each other saying, I need to be in, we're not. And it's just an hour of the red, which we've just spent an hour talking about it.
Yeah.
That's not the right way to do it. But I've seen it done that way as well. And I'm not sure how it's done in my zone. I haven't done.
My zone would be, again, it would be using generics. Now, one of the big advantages members of West Park have is that I'm there.
You're there, yeah.
So we can change their data based on it.
Okay.
You know, so like what theoretically is. So a lot of times, again, using generics, you what would be red could be actually green for you.
Yeah.
You know, so understanding and getting used to that.
The individuality
system,
of it.
Individuality is really, really, really important.
Yeah, yeah. I make no qualms about the fact that I'm really selfish on this podcast, and I'm looking for certain things for myself as well. And I'm going to bring you back just to a second, because you've talked very, very well about splits for running and marathons and achieving that kind of goal. What about a field-based sport like Gaelic football? Because this is just something I've been involved in for all my life, and I've seen it done well in a small percentage of cases, and I've seen it done wrong. Even now, at a super elite level, I see it done wrong in terms of training for the specific thing that you're trying to do. And in a field-based sport, it's usually stop-start. You need a good balance of aerobic and anaerobic. You need the skill bases, biomechanical issues, and all that kind of stuff. But from your kind of field, VO2, aerobic capacity, anaerobic capacity, how would you apply that to something like a field sport? Because the reason I ask is just what we've talked about. Most teams I see, it's just about go flog. There is no real split between aerobic and anaerobic.
Flog, injured.
And injured. And nobody improves their anaerobic, because you can never really fully apply that power and speed development, because you're asked to do it for 5 minutes or 20 minutes or we're going out for this run, we're going to run 10 laps and we're going to do it at this pace, we're going to do suicides, we're going to do it at this pace. These are all the familiar phrases that people hear, and if someone standing roaring at you.
That brings me back to basketball days.
Yeah, but it's most team sports are like this. I'm only asking from GAA because that's my background. How could you just give me a breakdown on how it should be done in that context? We're not looking to run 5K or 20K or whatever.
In a group setting, it's difficult. So
Very difficult.
That's the first point you have to think. And this is where personal responsibility comes in.
Okay,
so you have a coach, and I work with lots of them that are in field sports. They have an hour with a squad of 30 players. They're not going to go, all right, lads, let's go for a jog. The manager's going to be looking at them going, you're getting the bullet. So you as a player has to take personal responsibility. You can allow your coaching sessions with your conditioning coach to do your anaerobic, but we need to make sure you do some aerobic. Look at a field sport. It is predominantly an anaerobic sport, realistically, depending on your position. So you have to apply that. So you need to start to go, okay, well, do I need to get myself used to dealing with the negatives of anaerobic? So do I need to start to do more tempos? So I'll go out and do 2 kilometer repeats. I'm going to get 2K done in 8 minutes. So I know if I have to be put under pressure for 8 minutes, I'm going to be able to deal with it. Or if I need to know what it feels like to be up, down the pitch 5 times, start to do that. You know, it's very straightforward when you break down a sport. What is the application of physiology? So what is the system getting used? You need to biomechanically learn to turn quicker. Okay, you need to look at your breathing patterns. You need to look at what you're going to do when you recover. Do you put your hands on your head? Do you put them on your hips? How much of a downtime are you going to get? Are you a corner forward where there's going to be a bit more recovery? Are you a midfielder? Are you the goalkeeper? You know, so again, it's personalized individuality that will bring success. The stimulus on intervals and tempos that are done in training, and as you mentioned, like field runs and field sprints and line-to-line sprints, that's all well and good, but it has to be relevant to your position, to your sport, and you do then take responsibility externally. GAA, as we know, semi-professional, if even amateur, but the level of what you're expected to achieve is elite. So you might get 2 days with your club. What are you going to do for the other part of it? You go, okay, what I want to do is I want to start to do kilometer repeats, 3K efforts, 5K effort. So you're building the engine to resist fatigue. You're then going to do, okay, I'm going to do some S&C. Am I going to get some aerobic training done as well? So yeah, we need aerobic to adapt, you know. So it's a very, very fine balance to get it right. Unfortunately, I probably don't have the exact answer what you're looking for.
No, that is, you need to understand everything you've just said, and then apply that in whatever your team or your position is. So it makes perfect sense. There is no real exact answer. This is what you should do.
No, exactly. I think personal responsibility takes a big role, and not just say, I'm not getting fitter, my conditioning coach is shy. Like it's not really going to work like that. You have to take, and like look at the best athletes in the world. You go back through their life and you see the dedication that they put in to a certain attribute or a certain part of their performance. You know, so if you really want to get it, you need to start to apply science to performance.
Yeah.
So we can do our shuttle runs, we can do all of that. Let's integrate. So if the days that you can't train, can you do some bike work? Can you do some biomechanical work? Can you do some flexibility? Does it mean just gonna go to bed earlier? Get off your phone. Twitter isn't going to change from 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock at night, even though you've checked it 50 times.
Yeah.
Applying theory to your individual sport. Now, I'm a firm believer as well that it's not just all about aerobic growth. Apply it to strength. And one of the things you're going to think of is cycling. And this is a really nice one. Or rowing. So FTP at the moment, functional threshold power, is massively, everybody talks about it. Everybody wants watts. Everybody wants this.
In the context of cycling and rowing, or just in general?
Cycling and rowing, right? So this is where we identify threshold in power and in heart rate. So then if you adapt an S&C plan for 8 weeks, you produce more power for the same heart rate.
Okay.
So let's use, and this would be a common threshold, an anaerobic threshold would be about 200 to 230 watts. Okay.
When you say threshold, sorry, just to clarify, is this your optimal
Sorry,
operational
I never even
value?
spoke about this.
No, that's okay.
So we have numerous different thresholds. Aerobic threshold is where we use mixture. We go from fat utilization to fat and carbohydrates. So there's aerobic glycolysis.
Okay.
Then anaerobic threshold, which is AT, we go from an aerobic to an anaerobic state where we're using carbohydrate as our fuel.
Okay.
People will talk about lactate threshold. Lactate threshold is where we take blood. Once you exceed 4 millimoles of lactate, which is the measurement of lactate that's in the blood, you are identified as being anaerobic. The system that we use is the bicarbonate buffer that's used internally, or the body creates to deal with and dilute the acidity, is going to coincide with a high production of CO2. And we're going to be able to identify threshold. So threshold is the changeover point from oxygen utilization as prime fuel to carbohydrate utilization.
So essentially, if you want to be working anaerobically, your threshold is
has to grow.
Okay, that has to grow, because if you go over that, you're not anaerobic anymore. So you have to increase.
No, you're not aerobic.
So you're not aerobic anymore. Yeah. So you have to increase that threshold.
So my objective is to grow, or people's objective should be to grow anaerobic threshold.
I get you.
That's the objective.
Yeah.
Don't know how we didn't touch on that.
Yeah.
We came around a long way. So the purpose of aerobic training is to allow adaptation to occur to grow anaerobic threshold.
I get you.
So then there's aerobic growth.
Yeah.
There's aerobic capacity growth. So we get threshold breakdown, or we get 230 watts at threshold. You go away, you get a good S&C plan, you come back, you produce 260 watts for the same heart rate. So you're aerobic, but going 30 watts faster.
Okay.
S&C plays a big role, as you know in your background, as does biomechanics, there's lots at play here. So a cyclist or a triathlete, one of the big things I'd say to do is work on S&C in your off season to create more power.
This is actually an interesting conversation. I only had this the other day with a long distance runner. Now, I don't proclaim to be any sort of an expert in running, but there is a significant conversation now, and I don't know if it's directly linked to what you just said, between strength training and aerobic performance. So, like, traditionally, now, not on an elite level, but most people who train aerobically, they want to run or cycle or swim or whatever it is, they're almost allergic to strength training. Now, there's multiple benefits from an injury prevention point of view and all that kind of stuff as well. But in terms of improving aerobic performance, there's a lot of people talking about now how important having a strength and conditioning, but a strength phase or strength element to your training if you want to be an aerobic athlete.
Invaluable.
Yeah.
From a biomechanical perspective, from a core perspective, it's endless.
Well, most people think, I'm going to put on all this muscle, I'm going to be heavier, I'm going to slow down, I'm not going to be able to get it, but it's actually not the case. It's very hard to put on muscle.
Good luck with that one.
Yeah.
Getting it right though, working with some good coaches.
Yeah.
We unfortunately ran a competition. There's a couple of guys in West Park that run a company called New Life Coaching, and they're both have bachelor degrees in S&C from Setanta. And I wanted to run a competition where we get two athletes, male and a female, VO2 test them, and then they apply a strength and conditioning program specifically built to increase power in the lower body and retest.
Cool. Oh, that's cool.
Now COVID happened. We shut down, so we haven't been able to do it.
Okay.
We will do
That'd
it, though.
Be really interesting.
Really interesting in growth of power production.
Yeah.
So S&C plays an invaluable role, but even in how you hold yourself in the last 6 miles of a marathon.
Yeah.
Is your posture gone? What's your core done? Is your glutes too weak so your hip is knocked and then you get a knee injury?
Yeah.
You know, like it's endless.
Yeah, it's like if the tracking in your car is off as well, it can be much less efficient. You can wonder why you're burning through fuel.
Yeah.
Your tires are going to wear down.
Absolutely, you know.
Yeah.
The fueling perspective, again, well, I'll cover that in a couple of seconds with you, or a couple of minutes with you. But yeah, the threshold identification is absolutely key, and understanding the sport that you're in, what's the demand, how long do you have to perform for, what your position is, who are you playing, is the intensity going to be harder? Like I'm a Villa fan for my troubles, right? Very confident and happy with this year so far. And when we were playing Arsenal the other night, like I watched it, and the first thing that stood out to me was the intensity and the high press for the whole team.
Yeah.
And afterwards I said, they are going to be knackered after this, you know, because obviously sitting off an opponent. So is it opponent related? Do you have to have a specific high press for it? So overall, you're going to need to have the ability to run at a good pace for longer. What allows you to do that is having a higher aerobic capacity. So this is where it comes back to me saying that anything greater than 400 meters will benefit from having. I recently had, I wouldn't say in any way, shape or form it was an argument. I know him really well, John Mackey, really good sports scientist, and we had a bit of a conversation on Instagram where he was saying...
Healthy debate is what we call that.
A healthy debate, yeah, about his point that if your sport is anaerobic, you should stimulate that. So if your sport is point scoring, the explosiveness of back and forth. John has a very decorative background as kickboxing coach. He's in canoeing Ireland and stuff now. And he was like, well, they should do a lot more anaerobic training. But my point was, well, they should integrate some aerobic training in order to allow for adaptation to occur, but in order to have that engine built bigger.
Yeah.
So they break down later.
Yeah.
So if I break down at a higher pace than you break down, I'm going to be able to perform longer for better. Stepping off my stool or walking in off the octagon, I've recovered better than you have. Yes, I'm going to go anaerobic. Yes, I have to know what that feels like. But that aerobic adaptation phase for all sports, I'll argue with it all day long, is absolutely vital.
Was this the conversation around McGregor and his engine, I suppose, his ability to last to the later rounds? Like, the guy has massive power development. I'm not an expert in MMA either. Massive power development, excellent technique, he's a fantastic boxer. He's got all the tools you need to be a great fighter, I suppose, in MMA. But the aerobic capacity was something that let him down. So he wasn't able to apply that power that he has and that engine that he has in the later rounds.
5 rounds, 25-minute rounds, you know?
So he had the tools, like you have, if you could have a great 10K. But if that 10K is at the end of a marathon, like you said, it may as well be nothing because you can't use it, you can't deploy it. So is that what you're alluding to there with growing that aerobic threshold because it allows you to utilise your...
Like, you could argue... I don't know,
yeah,
is the answer. You know, like, the benefit in growing aerobic capacity will delay the onset of negatives associated with anaerobic.
Okay, yeah.
That's the easiest way to say it.
That does answer the question, actually, yeah.
Okay, so if we can delay the negatives by increasing aerobic capacity, they won't occur as early.
Yeah.
However, MMA is an explosive sport.
Yeah.
You're going to do very, very well not to be anaerobic early. But then again, it's recovery. How big your threshold is. If we're fluting around, we have an exchange, then we're kind of stepping off, feeling each other out in terms of, or I have your back, you have my back, just staging the recovery. If I can get back aerobic quicker than you can, it's going to be beneficial.
Yeah. But as I said, very hard to do when there's a fella trying to kill you.
Absolutely. Never mind adrenaline.
You hold on for another 3 rounds there. I just want to work out this aerobic capacity.
I just got to recover, you know.
And then we'll go
but look, MMA is brutal.
It's
unfortunately, last night I had a fighter of mine, Pedro, who was going for a title in Bellator, and he is probably the fittest athlete I've worked with, and he got knocked down in round 1.
That's the fucking thing
about
fighting, isn't it?
But we knew Pedro would be able to pressurize someone for 10 rounds.
Yeah.
At full intensity.
Yeah.
But that's the nature of the beast.
Context for MMA and fighting is so important. I'm not a fighter, but over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years, I tried various different styles. I tried Muay Thai. It's brutal. Really, really hard to do. I tried kickboxing, and it was absolutely eye-opening for me. I would have regarded myself at that time anyway as being in particularly good condition. I was very fit and quite strong, good all-round base. I was playing football now, but I was absolutely gassed after 2 or 3 minutes. It was so different. It was incredible. I felt like a child again. I don't know how to do this. I thought I was confident in my physical abilities, and it was absolutely insane. And what it did for me was, I used to watch MMA and say, how did he get clipped? How was he tapping out to that? Like 20 seconds practicing any form of martial art like that, where it's just on all the time, and you could get clipped, or you could get punched, you could get taken down, you have to try and reverse an arm, but you're trying to defend, all this kind of stuff. It's constant on. You appreciate looking at these guys. Like 5-minute rounds sounds like absolute hell to me, with context of having tried it.
I would agree. True experience. Obviously my sports background would be Muay Thai, where I could train 3, 4, 5 times a week, you know what I mean, build up this unbelievable fitness, and then through whatever, this is only recently, I had an injury in my rotator cuff. I was probably hadn't Muay Thai trained in 6-7 months, and I went back hitting pads, and over that time I took up running. I was running 3:36-minute kilometers, you know, and then I have to hit pads for 3 minutes, not 5 minutes. It's a different beast. The only other sport I would say is the same is swimming. Yeah. Now, it's probably a negative of mine because I come from a swimming background. I don't just get into the pool and do a length at a light leisurely pace. That's the plan. But I end up doing butterfly within 10 lengths, and my lats feel like they're about to explode. And like it's a different beast. Like even yesterday, the guys we were training with had commented there, it's like, look, you're looking really fit. And I was like, I don't feel fit from a Muay Thai perspective, but I feel really fit from a running perspective, or from a field sport. I'm not field sport. I do a lot of like Olympic lifting. I'd feel absolutely perfect with that, you know, but it's a different animal because you need your head turned on for the combination, the movement, the biomechanics, the balance, the guard. Muay Thai is the art of 8 limbs. It could be elbow, punch, knee, kick, anything, you know what I mean?
Octopus is coming at you,
Combination, intensity. It depends on your pad man. I'm getting drilled by this really hard pad man, and I'm thinking 2.5 minutes in, it's like, how am I going to finish this round? He then starts to do 5-minute rounds. Come on, you know, you're like, come on, pal. You know, but then that's an anaerobic adaptation. That's an anaerobic resistance I have to build. So what's going to build that resistance for me is anaerobic training, replicating uncomfortable physical training for 5 minutes. So I need to put myself under pressure to deal with that repetitively. Not just once. All the time, over and over and over and over again. And I know I'll be back. So I didn't train for probably about 3 weeks. Probably only doing 2 sessions a week at the moment, Muay Thai. And then over the last, like I've done maybe 2 or 3 sessions in the last 10 days. And I feel pretty poor, you know, I'm like, I should not feel like this, but that's knowing what level I should be at. One of my attributes would be the strength to continue to perform at a high level. Like my fitness would be, it should be, I suppose, of utmost.
I'd be disappointed if it wasn't now.
Of an attribute. The later I go into rounds, the better I become. Or the worse that the opponent or the pad man, everything. Like the pad man say, like they're getting workouts when they're training with me, even in the latter rounds, because they'll just keep calling and I'll just keep hitting. But that's time. That's years of training anaerobically, but also saying, I need a day off. I need 2 days off. I'm going to go for a nice, easy 40-minute cycle where my heart rate's not going to get over 120.
And training for the specific the specific task. It's funny you mentioned swimming there. Like I always tell this funny swimming story. I did a bit of swimming when I was a kid. Like I'd had swimming lessons, so I can not drown is the way I put it. I can get into the water and not drown. I can't really swim very well. And when we were in college in DCU, one of the modules was aqua aerobics. And as a bit of fun, we did a swimming relay. And again, at that time, I was in fairly good condition. I was competing in cross country. I was playing Gaelic football. I was doing all my VO2 Max tests. I was scoring pretty well. I was in generally good nick, really confident in my ability. Here we go, a physical competition. We lined up, and the first 3 in the water were me and 2 females, 2 girls. Not like female athletes are phenomenal. I'm not being sexist here, but it's like I'm in great. I'm feeling great here, and I dived in, and I swear to God, I hadn't even gone a length, and I thought I was going to drown because I'm not a swimmer. I just thought I'm going to be able to apply all my physical attributes to this swimming thing now. The 2 girls were finished, the next swimmers were in the water, and I was still limping my way back. I think it took me 3 swimmers to do my 1 length up and back. And I was gassed, absolutely gassed. And that taught me a really, really good lesson about just because you can run around a GA pitch or you can do your 12K cross country or whatever it is I was doing at the time, doesn't really necessarily apply to something else. So you've got to be really specific about what you're applying this to. And that kind of taught me, if I'm training for this, everything needs to be geared towards this. I can't just go out and do a bit of everything. Now, it will give you a general base of fitness, but that's what you're going to stay at forever unless you be a little bit more specific with it.
Absolutely.
So for swimming, there's no point going running 20k if you want to be a swimmer.
No.
It'll help a little bit,
yeah.
but you can be much more specific with it. Yeah.
One of the other things that you need to look at as well is, and it will tie it in nicely, so within our test, we will measure calorie expenditure during exercise. So it's done through what's called indirect calorimetry.
Okay.
So we know that 0.8 of a milliliter of oxygen is needed to burn 1 calorie. So we then start to look at this from a fueling performance perspective.
Brilliant. Okay.
So how many calories you get rid of in an hour? Where is it coming from? Is it from fat? Is it from carbohydrate? And then let's make a fueling plan. So probably 90% of people that come in have no fueling plan.
Yeah.
Like, what are you going to eat for the marathon? I don't know. Gels. I'm like, no, okay. So if you apply the science to energy, so when we're aerobic, we're using fat. When we're anaerobic, we're using carbohydrate. So if, again, we then look at all your expenditure, so calorie expenditure during exercise is relatively low, realistically.
Yeah, you gave me some figures on this, which is shocking.
Like, you're never really going to have anyone perform aerobically and get rid of more than 900 calories in an hour, aerobically. Anaerobically, the high end of anaerobic expenditure, I've seen like 1,500 calories an hour, but they're never going to be able to hold that.
Yeah, you can't perform at that level
no,
for an hour.
You wouldn't be able to. And remember then that expenditure is going to be a lot of carbohydrate. There's going to be aerobic and anaerobic. So there's going to be aerobic glycolysis, which is a bit of fat and a bit of carbohydrate. So within our test, we can work out specifically what energy system is getting used at what heart rate. So then the application of the likes of carb loading comes in. So we know we're doing tempo, we're doing interval, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. So we need to start to apply the theory on, okay, I'm going to have more carbohydrate today because I'm doing 2 anaerobic sessions tomorrow. Or I'm going for my log run. So people are like, oh, I had a pizza the night before my long run. I'm like, why? They're like, oh, I wanted a carb load. I'm like, but you're using fat as your main fueling source. Yes. So depending on intensity, will then rely on the application of specific food groups.
Okay, yeah.
Marathon runners, I would say generally you wouldn't necessarily need anything for the first hour. And then every hour, you're taking 1/3 of the calories that you're expelling back on.
Okay.
So easy numbers, 1,200 out, 400 back in.
Yeah. Okay.
You look at people, they go, I had a gel. 120 calories.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so now let's start to put food as an attribute, as much as sleep, S&C, hydration. Dehydration, what happens? Your muscles contract and expand at a lower rate. Your heart's a muscle. You're dehydrated, you turn anaerobic earlier because the heart is no longer delivering the oxygen to the working muscles at the rate it should. So hydration is really important, as we know. Hormonal balance. So are you just whacking 50 grams of sugar into you every hour? What's going to happen then? GI tract's going to obviously get messed up, but that insulin cortisol balance, issues, the cravings, are going to be there. I would be a big fan of real food. The likes of, it depends on what people can eat. So could you add a fat in? Could you add a protein in to slow absorption rate down? This is long distance, you know, like homemade flapjacks. Can you eat? Are you just whacking gels into you? Are you taking something you've never taken before? Like things like people rock up marathon and whack a load of high five into them and end up in every Portaloo that they see. So it's about fueling the systems. I recently interviewed, so when I say interview people, I do it on Q&A on Instagram.
Brilliant.
Every Thursday. And I interviewed Amy Maguire, who's a sports nutritionist for field sports athletes. And she says 36 for 6. So for 36 hours, the 6 meals you eat 36 hours prior to your game, field sport game, must contain decent amounts of carbohydrate. Okay, so you're getting your system primed. There's obviously overload as well, maximum storage capacity. Over time, the opinion has changed. You're not just going to turn all carbs into fats unless you're in a calorie surplus and things like that. But it's about getting the balance right. Look at it from a negative perspective. You go out to do an anaerobic session. You're doing a turbo session. You're doing interval repeats. And you're on this low carbohydrate, or as people like to do ketogenic diets at the moment. But you don't have the energy to do them. Why don't you have the energy? Because you don't have the carbohydrate.
Yeah.
Or ketogenic diets for field sports athletes or boxers or MMA athletes, where the glucose fueling the brain is not there. So your decision making is poor.
Massively important point. Yeah.
You know, like your shot choice, your hand pass, your hand-eye coordination, you know, your ability to perform, the brain is going to require a lot of glucose. So are you finding that performance is getting affected because you're not putting any emphasis on your nutrition?
Yeah.
You know, and how much nutrition to go in.
Yeah.
So, you know, like it's just, again, you're going to get that from this one test.
Yeah, it's nuts, really, the amount of information. I'm delighted you mentioned carb loading there. I mentioned this briefly I can't remember the exact podcast we were talking about, and I feel like I did a bit of a disservice because at the time I think we dismissed carb loading not as a fad. The point I was trying to make, and you've just clarified it beautifully there, is it depends. Carb loading is something people do, and they tend to say, I'm doing a marathon, I'm going to carb load. And they don't understand the energy systems they're going to be using. They don't understand why they're doing it, the type of food to eat, how to actually lead into it.
Or even like the food that you have on the day of your race is probably, or the day of a match, is going to have little impact.
Yeah, realistically little impact. But everyone wants to know, what's the meal you should eat last before? Well, that's the meal that you're going to be finding out about tomorrow. It's irrelevant.
No, it will have a role, but we need to make sure our systems are primed up to that point, you know, that we're fueling right. And I'm a massive, that's why I've studied nutrition. Like, there's just the power of it is just phenomenal.
Yeah.
From a B vitamin perspective to create energy.
Yeah,
you know, like, do you have enough B vitamins in your body to create energy?
Yeah.
You know, like what? So B vitamins are going to be used in the process of creating energy.
Yeah.
Have you taken enough B1, B5 in? You know, where you're going to get it, what's your food? Bring it back to simple, look at it in a different way. Do you have enough carbohydrate to perform anaerobically? Again, yesterday, I went out of my way. I had porridge, I had rice, I had fruit, I had smoothie, all before I trained.
Yeah.
Where normally I wouldn't be a massive carb eater. Not that I'm not, and that's probably wrong of me to say I would have carbs every morning.
Yeah.
But I mightn't have carbs every lunch. I could have more kind of salad and veg with protein. And then I'd have carb in the evening or whatever. So depending on the way and the intensity that I'm training, I will alter my food.
Yeah.
And then the benefit on that is that you'll get a better boost in performance on the days of anaerobic requirement, i.e. carbohydrate. So I mentioned probably carbohydrate, glycogen and glucose, they're all the same thing.
Yeah.
So carbohydrate broken down into glucose, stored as glycogen in our muscles and our liver. We store 500 grams of it and it runs out.
Yeah.
Okay. And it gets burned rapidly when we're anaerobic or where there's aerobic glycolysis. So there will be some carbohydrate depletion when we're aerobic. So that's where the benefits of gels and stuff will come in.
Okay.
But you have cyclists, and this is someone that told me they were taking, what did he say? He was taking 2 high five sachets an hour.
An hour?
50 grams of sugar in a sachet.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And I was like, how do you feel? He's like, oh, it's in bits.
Brutal.
You know? And I was like, and then this fella was carrying a bit of weight as well. Or your traditional triathlete, and I know people that are listening to me now will laugh at this, that stop on their cycle for a scone with cream. Or their Garmin told them they got rid of 1,200 calories, so they go and have a McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know, you're not entitled to replenish everything you got rid of. Like, you have to look at the balance here. Like, if you're looking to drop weight, it's not, oh, I got rid of 1,200, I need to eat 1,200. It's about deficit creation.
Yeah.
You know?
But also, I'm going to clarify an important point here as well, because there's a whole other side of Seán Kinane here as well, which is nutritional therapy. And we're going to do a separate podcast.
Metabolic.
And metabolic, yeah. And we are going to do a separate podcast. But just because this is relevant to the performance side of things that we're talking about now as well, we'll discuss this too. There is a misunderstanding among people as well, if they're training and if they're doing all these wonderful things and they're running marathons and all that kind of stuff, that they can kind of
eat what they want
and not eat what they want, and they can create the calorie surplus or deficit whatever way they want. But they just, because they're training, they think, I am healthy, therefore the fuel is just fuel, it doesn't matter. But they forget the whole micronutrient conversation. When you're eating more or less, what's in that more or less, like a calorie is a calorie, but a calorie is not just a calorie as well. So there's two ways of looking at this.
But even look at it from like a magnesium, sodium perspective. Like
Absolutely.
sodium, before I studied nutrition, I was like, I'm not eating salt.
Yeah.
Now I'm like, give me that Himalayan salt, like a good rock salt.
Yeah.
To help with energy deliverance.
Help with energy deliverance is so important for muscle function. If you just want to look at it from an athletic point of view, your muscles cannot function without an adequate balance of electrolytes and salts in the system. It just doesn't work. But
or a lot of people would go, oh, I just need salt, I need salt. But what about magnesium and potassium.
Yeah, and the balances of the different salts.
So using the likes of an Epsom bath or an Epsom foot soak post long run.
Yeah.
So as I say to people, you go out for a 4 hour run, then say to your partner, I'm just going for a bath. It probably won't go down too well. So use a foot soak. The body will absorb magnesium really well through the feet.
Yeah.
You know, which is going to help with recovery, muscle recovery, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
The nutrition side of things is just dropped. It's not thought of really from a performance perspective, you know.
Yeah, and I think, and this is one thing that I've considered for a long time, looking at different elite athletes, to be very, very good at a specific task, like an elite long distance runner or an elite bodybuilder or an elite whatever. To take your body to the pinnacle of that performance actually has a really negative impact on your body, because we're designed to do all these, we're designed to move and to be physical and active, but to push yourself to those kind of limits can be very negative. So you have to compensate by being very, very, very aware of all the recovery factors we spoke about and minding your body and your system and your physiology. And that is understanding your nutrition to a micro level, not just what is going to fuel this particular event. But
or even looking at it from a recovery perspective with anti-inflammatory foods.
Anti-inflammatory foods, watching your insulin, your cortisol issues. Like, people would look in general at an elite endurance runner and say, my God, he's so healthy. In reality, a lot of people who don't really understand what they're doing can push themselves, and it's amazing what they do from a mental strength and fortitude point of view. I can run hundreds and hundreds of miles, or I can get my body to this physical shape. But the chances are, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a high percentage of those people are not healthy, and they're not looking after their longevity as well. And that's where you need to understand this is I almost compare it to almost being pregnant is a massive drain on resources in your body. I think the stats are it takes 3 to 5 years for a female to recover physiologically from having a child, and that's not physically from the actual childbirth, but from the drain of resources on your body needed to create a human being. And it's the same with elite performance, or most levels of performance. It's a drain of resources on your body. So you need to be aware of that.
You can even look at it from a perspective with female athletes that lose their period.
Amenorrhea, it's crazy. It's crazy. And women
you know what's even more crazy about it is I had a client recently and she hadn't had a period in 2 years. And not once was it listed as a concern for her in her screening forms. And I was like, hang on. She came to me nutritional therapy with some digestive issues or whatever. And I was like, so I do up all my recommendations prior to seeing her. And then speaking to her, and it's like, what's the menstrual cycle? Like, oh no, I haven't had it in 2. And I was like, what? She just thought it was not. She didn't just. It was just completely normal. And then you look at it and apply that to an athlete, a female athlete. It happens so much more regularly. So you can see the damage that can do to somebody.
Oh, it's actually frightening sometimes when you think about it. Like females are a great example because there's I call it a much more delicate balance that has to be maintained and observed with the female endocrine system and everything like that. But it's the same for men as well. It's particularly now, like the clinic I worked in, big on testosterone and understanding the effects of testosterone on all the different aspects of your life, not just fat loss and muscle building, but on everything from cardiac health to psychological performance to brain degeneration. Like your hormone and endocrine system, which is linked to everything we've talked today about today. Understanding the effect of training, like even like people might be listening to this now saying they're not talking about me, they're talking about elite athletes. Weight loss, massively important. Males or females losing weight can be very, very dangerous for many reasons. Obviously, you can have the release toxins with massive weight loss and all that, but from a hormonal point of view, from a micronutrient point of view, if you start losing weight, your body is literally changing, your physiology is changing, and if you just cut out calories and increase your exercise, number one, you alluded to this earlier, you're adding stress on top of stress. That's the first problem you see. And number two, you're going to be massively deficient. You're going to be leaching essential nutrients from places that you can't afford to be leaching them from, and you're not going to be healthy. But the societal thing is you're losing weight, you're going to be healthy. So it's really nuanced, and why it's so important to have these conversations.
I think that's like when you understand nutritional therapy, and I say we'll go into that on the next one, it's looking at the system in such more of a deep understanding of human function or anatomy function, like that. You're saying you've dropped weight, but where have you pulled these essential nutrients from because you haven't eaten X, Y, and Z, and looking at just a million and one things. But the power of nutrition from performance is phenomenal. Like everybody probably just thinks, oh, I'm going to take protein. You know, like, okay, so how's that protein going to get there? Yeah. You know, is there a deliverance system? Is there carbohydrates coming in to help with it? You know, what's your fats like? Where's the balance? What's the minerals like? You know, like again, like the point you said there is people listening to this mightn't be professional athletes, but you you, whoever you are listening to me, will benefit from increasing the quality of your nutrition in performance, or in everyday life,
Mood, general mood and well-being.
Just paying a bit of attention to it, One of the things I did want to speak to you about before, if we wrap it up.
Oh, keep going, please.
Is carb rinsing or carb washing.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know it?
I've heard of it. I'm not very well versed on it, so
okay,
you can
so
educate
carb
me.
rinsing or carb washing was something that was traditionally, tennis players do it a lot of cyclists, you see it in kind of the Tour de France. The last World Cup, a lot more footballers were doing it. So carb rinsing is where we take a carbohydrated drink, so Lucozade, Gatorade, flat Coke, not sugar-free because we're looking at it for a sugar hit.
Yeah.
So the enzyme that's needed to break down carbohydrate is amylase, and it's produced in the mouth. So salivary amylase is what we feel in our mouth when we start to salivate for a food. Okay, so the body's priming already chemical digestion. So what we do is we take carbohydrate in our mouth, swish it around, spit it back out. The signals will be that we've consumed carbohydrate, and it will give a boost in performance for, I don't know the actual percentage and figures on it, but it will give us a temporary boost in performance.
No way.
Because it will trick the brain to think that we've consumed carbohydrate, and it will pull deep on the storage to get that last bit out.
Yeah.
Now, it will only work in the latter part of an event and if we've had adequate carbohydrate storage. You're not just going to go keto, take a drink of carbohydrate and hope for the best. It's not going to work.
Okay.
Or you don't do it at mile 3 in a marathon.
So are you looking at this in the context of somebody who might be on a low carbohydrate diet and doesn't want to actually consume the carbohydrate?
No. I'm looking at it from a perspective of an athlete who's performing and physically doesn't want to eat or drink because of the uncomfortableness in the latter part of an event or the intensity's high in a tennis game. Yeah, it's amazing. So carb rinsing or carb washing. It's crazy. Now they were talking that you're not gonna see it as much now post COVID or with COVID. You can't do it, but I've seen it happen loads of times.
Yeah. But another example of understanding how your body reacts to this certain substance, because food is fuel, and understanding how your body reacts to that and how you can benefit off that. Like I talk to people about biohacking all the time, and there's loads of different definitions of that. But for me, that would be a biohack because you were literally hacking your own mainframe here and saying.
But again, use it in the latter part. When you're feeling under pressure, you don't want to eat, your stomach mightn't be well because of whatever, you haven't had a good fueling system or you haven't done it right. It is a hack. It's a way of getting around it, it is understanding that.
So just to kind of tidy up the last bit of the VO2 and all that kind of stuff, obviously we've gone into beautiful depth on how all of this works. So if I come to you in Health Matters, what's the process for VO2 Max? Why am I coming to you first? If I'm coming to you, why am I coming to you in Health Matters for my VO2 Max test? I'm looking to improve performance in a certain way.
Looking to improve performance, definitely. Identify thresholds, training zones. You might be looking at calorie expenditure. You might just want to check your heart health, make sure it's okay. A couple of runners, older runners that start in sport that just say, I just want to make sure everything's okay. But realistically, 9 times out of 10, it's to... probably 8 times out of 10, it's to get the threshold zones, to get an education as to the science terminology, aerobic, anaerobic, what it means, and basically what do they need to do to get better. So the process will be contact me via email, social media, whatever. I will get a call in with you straight away. Over lockdown, we have now gone all online, so everything will be booked via an online booking system. Confirmation email, 24 hours prior to your test, confirmation text message. You'll rock up to me if you're coming to my facility in West Park Fitness in Tala. You'll come in, access to the changing facilities. I'll meet you at reception, bring you up onto the floor, bike test, road test, run test, whatever the case is. Progressive overload, start to finish, until you physically can't go anymore. Up into the office, and then we'll go through all your data. And that's where the education is, like it's only a process up until that point. That you're going to take.
I like that description.
Take it through. And then it's up to me to interpret what way each individual needs to be told this data. Like I mightn't go into hydrogen ion production with Peter. Because he doesn't need to know it. I will dumb it down if I need to, or if I have someone that's question, I'll blow them out of the water with the information. But they have to leave understanding it. If they don't leave understanding it, I haven't done my job. You'll get your file there and then. On the back of the main sheet, there's a full explanation of all terminology used. There's a couple of pages of graphs and things like that I would go through with you. And then there's a summary report put in at the back. So again, all scientific terminology used. What a tempo is, what an interval is, why do we do this? You have a unique test ID number. So if you lose your file, you ring me. If you want to talk about your file post-testing, you ring me. What's this? Or you come back, we pull your file up. We put them on top of each other. So we correlate your graphs. Look at the changes in this. Look at this, your bike, this is your run test, that type of thing. Time frame wise, believe it or believe it not, it'd be done in an hour. So we allow an hour for our booking VO2. Metabolic can be done in 30 minutes or an hour. If we do VO2 and metabolic, an hour, hour and a half. We add nutrition, 2 hours. You know, there's lots of different things that do come into play when we're doing it. It's a very straightforward process. There's absolutely nothing to be concerned or worried about. My job or the staff's job is to make sure you're comfortable. The only time I had
you're uncomfortable.
The only time I had someone fall off a treadmill was...
I was wondering what you're going to say.
He had never been on a treadmill before, and he thought he was moving the treadmill.
Oh, yeah.
And at 17.5 kilometres an hour, he stopped his legs. Gone.
Yeah.
Now, he was the best runner in the club. And a couple of people had come in to watch him. You know, we were on site there. We were in Limerick, and the way we were, there was a camera right beside us as well. We had it on camera. He was fine now, thankfully. Whatever way he went on the treadmill, he ended up getting shot up in the air and landed on his arse and spat out the back. Which was great, you know. But that's the only time I've ever had anything happen to people. The mask can be a bit daunting, the thought of it, but the process, you will always have oxygen available. Like when you're standing still, the level of oxygen you have available will be the same at the end. Why it becomes uncomfortable is because the frequency of exhale. Mask gets warm, psychologically you start to doubt. You know, but that's up to me and Keelan to keep pushing you and making sure that you're comfortable and safe throughout. Once we do an active recovery, up into the office, go through it all. You have access to the showers, facility in the gym, free parking on site, exit 11 off the M50. We work 6 days a week, minimum, Monday to Saturday. I've taken Sundays back only in the last couple of years.
Now, get that balance back, man.
I know. No, I do take time off. But now work-life balance is vitally important and something that I've learned over lockdown, believe it or not. It's been good for me. In saying that, I did say post-lockdown one, I'm going to take more time off. But I had a backlog.
You have a passion for it. You love it.
And then weekends, we do full weekends for clubs. So
very good.
If you're in Mayo and you want me to travel, I'm going to try and get it done in one weekend. So if we need to get 2 machines on site for 3 days, 1 machine on site for 2 days, it doesn't matter. We'll make it work. So Sundays do work for me. I don't do Sunday bookings on an individual basis. But we do evening appointments. So we work till 9 o'clock on a Wednesday, work till 7 o'clock most days. Don't start too early, start at 10 a.m. On a Saturday would be my earliest start. I start about 8:30 on a Saturday. And then work, because we close a bit earlier on a Saturday, kind of 4:30. In terms of contact, my number is on the website. The website's myhealthmatters.ie. We're on social media, so Instagram is @healthmatters6411. Twitter is @healthmatters with 1 T in the matters. And
social handles.
Facebook is @healthmattersireland. But look, I'm sure you can tag them in the show notes.
Absolutely, I'll have it all up in the show notes. And just a little caveat as well. Like, I've done I've done a few of these tests, and not with yourself, but it's slightly uncomfortable for a period of time, but it's not the nightmare people imagine it to be. And I'm imagining with yourself, and my experience was very, very positive in terms of it's very controlled. You're always very, very safe. I asked you about the big red button. There is a big red emergency button there if you need it. The mask is a little bit uncomfortable because it's unfamiliar, but it's not a nightmarish situation. Some people look at, oh God, I don't want that to be me.
Recently, I had 2 fellas come in with GoPros.
Cool.
We recorded the whole thing.
Cool.
So they're up on my Instagram, and you'll see the face of them when we take the mask off. Like the art of getting the mask off in 1 second is key. You know, so
get this thing off me.
Within a minute, within 5 seconds, you're completely...
You're back. You're back.
You're fine. There is a moment of really uncomfortableness, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it is.
There is temporary pain for long-term success.
Look, we've just talked for nearly 2 hours about the benefits of understanding this type of data, and VO2 Max in particular has so many benefits for 15-20 minutes of
and it's not just
15-20 minutes of discomfort.
No, absolutely
it's
not.
A minute, maybe
3-4.
Just trying to be nice, just trying to get you a bit of business here. It's 3 or 4 minutes.
No, it's 1 minute now
of discomfort for all of this information. But what's really important is it's not a Fitbit. It's not an app that's going to spit you all these numbers on your phone. You're going to get frustrated by it. You're there to help individualize this. For me, that's the most important part of this, because you can go and get tests for anything everywhere. And anyone who's been for blood testing or GP or whatever, is familiar with being given numbers and not really understanding exactly what to do with them and being a little bit frustrated and disillusioned. What I really like about what you've explained in your approach is it's individualized. You're going to take that data but make it work for that person. And it's not about, right, there you go, Sheila, thanks very much, see you next week.
Yeah.
It's about, right, Sheila, where do you want to go? Okay, here's where you are, and here's the numbers, here's the information, and here's also how we're going to get you towards where you want to go. Now, you have to do a bit of work, but here's your guidelines or your routine or your structure, your feedback.
They will have to do a bit of work, and that's a good point, though, because I only arm you with the information.
That's the point, yeah.
And they have to go and do the work.
You have to do it.
Yeah.
But it's much easier to do it when you know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and you're being guided.
The why, I think, is the more important, as to why you have to run slow. Or as to why you
can't wait to run slow. I can't wait to go out and do me 5K now in 2 hours.
As to why you have to run a kilometre in 4 minutes. You know what I mean? Understanding the theory, understanding the process. And I'm always there for people to contact me post-testing. Yeah. Always. If I don't want to answer the call because it's too late, I won't. And I'll ring you back. Yeah. Send me a voice note on WhatsApp. I'll respond to you. Like, I'm often criticised for being on my phone, but I'm running a business that is reliant on customers' understanding, and I've no problem getting back. People now, it's funny, people ring me, yeah, Seán, I did a test with you in February 2017. What was my score again? And I'm like,
hold on, let me just have a think.
I was like, hang on, pal, I have no clue. Yeah. You know, so I need specific numbers when you ring me, but just never feel, I always say, never feel afraid to reach out to me and ask me the question. It's my job to know it, it's not yours. Yeah. And when we educate them, sometimes it can be a bit daunting. What did he mean by this? What did he mean by that? And then if we do a club, everybody might take a bit different on. You're all talking and people no, what's the story? But it's special. I love it. Personalized, individual, numbers and data based off science. Yeah. You can't argue with it.
Literally.
You can argue with it, but it's pointless. You know, so, big push on at the moment. We're looking to really get more out there for the country work. So if there is any clubs that do think, or any individuals that do think that this would benefit them, look, just get in contact with us, you know. Send me an email, include your number, and I'll ring you. If you don't include your number, I'm going to ask you for your number and I'm going to ring you. So I'm like, I never try and do bookings over the email. I just think a lot of it gets lost. So I'd like to speak to you before you come in. We do some wheelchair testing as well with the hand bikes.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, very cool. Interesting. Yeah, I did that a couple of them this year, last year. Really interesting. The first time I ever done it, you know. So, depending on what your sport is, there's definitely something there. And I, not just from a business perspective, I believe the benefits of it is just, there's something there for anyone that has any interest in health and performance. Yeah.
Seán Kinane, I genuinely have both really enjoyed that conversation now. And based off our chat before we turned the mics on, we've another 3 or 4 podcasts to go because we haven't gotten into most of it.
I knew when we spoke, I was like, I know that the VO2 stuff is just going to go on too much before even mentioning metabolic testing. Yeah,
there's no point, like we're 2 hours in, there's no point overloading people. I think that was really specific and really good. I really enjoyed it. And I wasn't quite sure how you were going to communicate all of this information about VO2 Max, and you didn't disappoint. It was really, really valuable. And I know I buzz off this stuff anyway, and I'm sure everybody from the elite athlete to Mary on the couch, sorry Mary, we keep using Mary on the couch, there's something in that for everybody. So I really appreciate your time. I'm going to lock you in right now in front of everybody. We're going to have you back on, absolutely.
Let's do it, man.
Let's do it. We've lots more to talk about, but thank you so much for the value you've brought. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Yeah, cheers, man.
Well, the brain will be tired after all of that. Such an informative conversation, and thanks again to Seán. I am definitely looking forward to round 2. Thank you to everyone who's been listening to the podcast and sharing the show with your friends and family. The feedback has been absolutely brilliant, and we're really ramping things up in the coming weeks and months. We have lots of exciting guests and topics coming, so thank you. At the moment, one of the best ways to help a podcast you like to grow and develop is to leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. So if you do enjoy this show, it will be massively helpful if you rate the Prymal podcast. And if you're not quite sure how to do this, I'll pop some links up in our social media during the week to help you. I really appreciate your support. If you want to keep your finger on the pulse and follow us, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Prymal Pro. Visit the website www.prymal.ie, and if you'd like to get in touch with the Prymal team, you can email podcast@prymal.ie. And don't forget, guys, Seán has kindly offered a discount to any listeners of the Prymal podcast if you want to have some VO2 Max or metabolic testing done. So head over to the Health Matters website, www.myhealthmatters.ie, or get in touch with Seán through his social media to book your tests in now. See you next time.